from private donors towards this project in addition to the grant funding. So there's a really a great opportunity to bring a really high quality piece of equipment that allows for anybody to use it and really make the City of Forest Lake a destination park, because there is such a need for these in communities, and people do travel to these sites where there are inclusive playgrounds. So tonight's just, you also have a couple examples that different manufacturers have put together. The barrier-free playground that you see in the packet is one where it would be a truly inclusive playground where really anybody of any ability could access anything on this playground. So that's an example that was put together that would fit within the existing play space. There's two different views of that. With this one, there's an access point. Some of the features include extra wide ramp space so that multiple wheelchairs or a wheelchair or able-bodied children are able to pass or walk through. Each deck as you go on that playground gets another foot higher. So there's 6 different deck levels going from 1 foot all the way up to 6 feet. A lot of different slides, there's transfer spaces. There's a lot of great safety features where the gates are certain widths so that wheelchairs couldn't fall off of there, and it only allows for 1 child to access at a time, which is a good safety feature in playgrounds. These come with some big shade awnings and just a lot of fun things for people or children of any ability or adults to enjoy. You can also scale back and on cost and do a more simplistic playground with just some inclusive features. So there's a couple different examples. You'll see the playground with inclusive components. There's a sway fun, which you can access via ramp. There's also some other hand pedalers that children with or adults with disabilities or wheelchair bound can utilize. So those are just some examples that we've had and are considering for this grant opportunity.
Do you want your video shown?
I think they have it in the packet.
Oh, they do? Okay.
It's in the agenda packet, all the images.
Yes.
And you have that pulled up, correct? Okay. I guess I could put it up there, but.
It would be helpful if you,
Okay.
that way
Do you have the
we're
cord?
seeing exactly what you're
yeah.
saying.
I think it is the same thing.
Sorry, one moment. Okay. Okay. So this was the one, the barrier-free that I was explaining with. This one's a truly 100% inclusive playground. So again, someone in wheelchair bound can access via the ramp and go to they can go up to the 6-foot platform. They can do that alongside someone who's able-bodied. Everything on this piece of equipment, someone in a wheelchair who's wheelchair bound can enjoy. There's some of the slides, and I can't speak to all the levels of detail, but there's transfer points for individuals in wheelchairs to access the double slides. Underneath the structure, there's other little activities that have transfer points. And let's see here. There's a lot of other climbing features. So really this encompasses a lot of different creative play activities, things that are also, some of the tunnels are more quiet spaces. If somebody has a sensory need that wants just more of a quiet space, there's that's incorporated into this design, and it's again really just made for people of all abilities and allows everyone to be able to play together. So that was the designs I was showing here. You can see some play structures. These platforms that I'm kind of circling here, those are 8 feet by 8 feet. So they're significantly large enough that you can have multiple wheelchairs or individuals on there without having a flow of traffic issue or anything like that. And this company, they're very diverse, and they've done a couple inclusive playgrounds in other communities. So this is something that they put a lot of thought into in the design elements within the existing space that we have at Lakeside Memorial Park. These are just some examples of a playground with inclusive components. So again, some kind of more of your standard playground features, and then you have some accessory items. So here's another example. These would be accessible for wheelchairs as well. This is a hand cycle as an example. And then this is called a sway fun, where you can access via wheelchair, so you don't have to, if you're wheelchair bound, you can also enjoy that play feature. And this is an Omni Spin, which you can, it's engineered with a transfer point, so if you are able to, there's a transfer point from a wheelchair onto the piece to enjoy as well. So this is just a third design where it's kind of a combination where there's a few more ramps, but then you have the sway fun, and then this would just be, this part would not be fully accessible. So again, then this just evening, we're just looking for an opportunity to provide some feedback on the Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission's desire to pursue this grant opportunity. The next steps would be tomorrow is a Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission meeting where they would review these designs as well and provide some final feedback for the grant application. And then at the March 26th regular city council meeting, I would come forth with the grant application along with this resolution. This is just a draft for you to review tonight, but the grant does require this resolution to be included in the grant application. So this is something that would come to the March 26th council meeting for consideration and approval. And then the grant is due March 30th, so that would be our submittal date. If awarded the funding, we would find out in June of this year, and it'd be a project to be completed this fall. And again, with this specific project of an inclusive playground, I know there's local support up to $20,000 to $30,000, and then a private donor likes to contribute to inclusive playgrounds, and they're interested in Forest Lake if we would pursue this, so that would be another private source of funding. There's another grant that I'm aware of that also supports inclusive playgrounds up to $15,000. So those are some additional funding opportunities that we'd be looking at to support kind of a unique destination style playground. That would be something for everybody. So with that, I'll open up to council for any questions or comments. I'm looking just for any feedback you may have.
All right, thank you, Jamie.
You're welcome.
Any thoughts or feedback?
The cost estimates, those are total numbers, I mean, from 100,000 to 250,000.
Right,
They're total,
so
whatever's decided, we'd be half of that, right?
Right, and so final cost projection would come back. So if we apply for the grant March 30th and we're awarded the funding, at that time it would come back to city council for final approvals at that time to know the exact cost to the city. I should have a good understanding. The grant is a 50% match, so let's just say the cost is $250,000. We would ask for half in the grant. The other half would be funded through city's responsibility, which those private donations and whatnot could go towards the city's responsibility.
Do you need to apply for either a partially inclusive or a fully inclusive, and is it a yes, no, or how does that work? Or do you need to decide what the ask is prior to the application, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the strongest application would be the design or element that provides the greatest level of safety and accessibility. If you in the research I've done, former years of people who've applied for the same grant for improvements for safety and accessibility have been awarded anywhere from $60,000 to $120,000. So I think the one that, the barrier-free playground, for example, that provides the most level of safety and inclusivity. It's a 100% inclusive playground, that everything on that playground is accessible whether you're in a wheelchair or not. So I think that would be our strongest application for the grant funding, and I think that would be, we'd probably get our biggest bang for the buck if we're awarded the funding, if up to half of that is covered. And then assuming these private donors move forward.
And what was the budget for, prior to this plan being considered, what was the budget for replacement? Because that was on docket for 2018 anyway, right? And what was that number?
We were looking at about $100,000 is what you can get. For $100,000, you can get a very nice standard playground. So if you wanted to go the high end with an inclusive playground, and let's just say that cost is around $250,000, we could have over half of that funded through grants and private donors, because private donors are really interested in supporting an inclusive playground. So we either could invest around the $75,000 to $100,000 city funded for kind of just a standard new piece of equipment. Or with this grant opportunity, if we're awarded the funding, we could have a much higher level, higher quality caliber destination playground for that same similar cost.
Ed?
Yeah, I like the idea of the inclusive playground. Does it expose the city to any more liability versus a non-exclusive playground?
I don't think it does. I think it's still all covered under the, general insurance. There's no additional safety hazards. All of the companies that manufacture this, safety is one of the top things they take into consideration in the development. The surfacing would still meet all the requirements for fall protection. So I don't think there's any additional liability. I can certainly follow up with our city attorney prior to next week, but I don't think that it would result in any additional liability on the city.
Thank you.
All right. So my thoughts on this are, I think it's a great idea. At the end of the day, if we get the grant, we're not saving any money over a normal playground. That's really not the big part of my concerns. But when I look at all the equipment here, I see things for, 6-year-olds. I don't see them for 10, 12-year-olds, things like that. I mean, barrier-free, wonderful, but, we need to keep those older kids doing things as well. My bigger concerns are the location. I don't think Lakeside Memorial Park is going to be the right spot for this. I'll give you a few reasons. Number one, real estate down there is really, really expensive. That's a very busy park. We got a lot of activities going on. This thing is using up a lot of terrain.
That was my question, footprint.
So going beyond that, the frost at the lake has wreaked havoc with every piece of playground equipment we've ever had. If we're going to invest this much money into something, I want to see it at a park that it's going to hold up at. Fenway Fields, Cedar Park, Belts Park. I want to see it someplace where that it can really get utilized long-term without that level of maintenance at Lakeside Park. I mean, Lakeside Memorial Park gets all that traffic that it really needs, and I think we're doing a disservice eating this much terrain up rather than, focusing on another one of our parks where, especially, barrier-free, parking and accessibility to get from their vehicle to the equipment, things like that are all going to become factors. So, yeah, I think we should look at pursuing this grant, but let's kind of work it through and find another location for that. I know the equipment at Lakeside needs to get replaced. That's a whole different topic to talk about because, yeah, that needs to get replaced too. And that equipment sees so much use anyway. I think that this is really a great idea for one of our regional parks. I personally think out by Fenway would be a wonderful location for it. But, that's, I think, up to the Parks, Lakes, and Trails to talk about again. But I really can't favor it at Lakeside Memorial Park because there's so many other things going on there. And to, eat up this much additional terrain, I think would be doing a disservice.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions? Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, the one, Jamie, I think you had talked about as Ben had mentioned, for older children, you went somewhere they had a zip line?
Yes, I have visited a park with a zip line and have pursued that. We have a presentation tomorrow from the Forest Lake School District's Political Action Committee, again on Belts Park. So I've shared with them, there's a new park in Golden Valley, just opened, I believe, within the last year, and they did a challenge course, which is geared towards that teenage population. So I shared that with the Political Action Committee, they've added that to their presentation for something at Belts Park. So that something along that action challenge course, Ninja Warrior, Zipline activity is still being actively pursued right now. The Lakeside Memorial Park has very limited space in that existing container for playground equipment. So to get a zip line in there, there's room for the smallest zip line that they offer, but there's such a large use zone required that then you're really limited to what you can have in addition to the zip line. So if we would have the zip line at Lakeside Memorial Park, for example, we're really limiting additional equipment, or we'd have to go and use another new area of green space and turn that into a container. So the zip line and the challenge course that's offered is still being pursued, but just a different location than Lakeside Memorial Park.
But is that something that could be incorporated with this plan for all-inclusive at, say, something like Fenway?
It could. An example that I can provide is there's a Madison's playground in Woodbury. It just opened about a year ago. It's a fully 100% inclusive playground, but it's a very large space. And the larger you go with inclusive playgrounds, obviously the more expensive they can be. So I think that project was upward of $500,000 for something that elaborate. But what I've learned through this process is that that's a destination park. People travel to Madison's playground in Woodbury, and it's used a lot. So really that would be a budget question at that time if that's something that the City of Forest Lake would envision. The reason for the proposal of the grant at Lakeside Memorial Park is just within that existing space to provide a fully inclusive playground, it's possible, but that would be more of $250,000 price tag. So I think if we can certainly consider other locations, but I think then we're going to have potentially more cost beyond the $250,000.
Is there a cap on the grant?
There is not a cap on the grant that I'm aware of. It's just 50% match. What I've seen from previous years, if you look at the history, I think the most I've seen awarded was about $120,000 or so, $150,000.
Would the people that design this, maybe you could also discuss with them kind of a build out, an A, B, and a C, to where we could start with, 150, 200,000, and then add equipment if other grants or things come available in the following years, but then we have a plan that doesn't need to be reconfigured or, here's what we got and we're
Yeah.
stuck with it type of thing. I shouldn't use the word stuck with it, but, it'd be
Sure.
nice to be able to start with, some really nice pieces and then be able to add on to that without having to tear anything up anyway.
Yeah, I know there's, from the few inclusive playgrounds that there are in the metro area, nothing up in this area, there are some that I think talked a little bit about a phased approach, so they got to phase one, so I didn't research enough of what that phase one looked like or whatnot, but I could certainly ask how in other projects have they done any phased approaches to an inclusive playground, get a little more information there.
I guess I had looked at this assuming that the plans or the pictures you were showing were on the existing playground footprint for Lakeside. Your
Correct.
comments made me believe that maybe that was expanded. How much footprint would be planned for if it were at Lakeside?
If it were at Lakeside, it would be in this is spec'd to the current size of the container the playground currently exists in.
Just the play structure,
Just
not
the
the
play
swings?
structure, not the swings.
Just the play
So the
structure.
area right down by the lake where the existing container. Some of the issues or concerns of the frost level, we've talked about that in great extent. This, depending on which company, they all have a slightly different approach to it. But I know for example, the barrier-free example, their estimate includes going below the frost level, digging deeper than what they've done before, and had talked a lot about the installation process. Their equipment doesn't use clamps on their posts. They have a new technology, so they just said that that's a significant improvement, and they've never had to really replace any of those. And so I think we've talked about that and the warranties that would take place. I know I've connected with Ryan on the original plans, and I just think that the original structure there was not installed properly, or that, was poor installation of the former owners of the business. So I think those were things that I wouldn't move forward with anything if I didn't have the confidence in it, because I wouldn't want to be in that same situation either. If we're investing city dollars on something and be in the same position 12 years from now, I would not want to be down that road at all. So we've talked about it, and I feel pretty comfortable with the answers that I've been given. I can't speak to the detail again of the engineering that goes into it. So that's where I've talked to Ryan and some of the installation experts in that area, and they've given me a reassurance that it should be resolved.
Do your concerns on frost change if we're able to get some sort of warranty language that would guarantee against frost damage, and if it is kind of similar footprint? I know it's been a challenge out there, but maybe there's a way to contractually protect us for that concern.
Frost can be dealt with, but it's so close to the lake that,
It is going to be a problem.
frost isn't, there's also the push when the ice comes out, and, things are going to move. I mean, I don't think anybody would guarantee that the equipment isn't going to move around. I just think we can find a better place to put a park like this. If it's a destination park, these features are going to be a destination, a regional, they're going to draw. I think we should look at where we need to put it, because Lakeside is so busy that it really does limit it. And it's a seasonal park too. I mean, it gets cold there when the wind starts blowing. So I just really feel that we can come up with a better location, and we can still have some nice play features at Lakeside as well.
Okay.
Enough to go on?
Yeah, thank you. That's great feedback. So I'll bring that to the Parks Commission tomorrow.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And is Chris Olson here? Kind of skipped over you for open forum, so
Sorry, welcome. How you doing?
great. How are you tonight?
Turn this a little bit. My name's Chris Olson, and I'm with Northern Plains Aviation. And I'm just here today to try and, we have a couple of sticking points. We're trying to make a pretty large investment in your airport out there. And one of the problems that we're kind of running into here is that the lease that we have for the commercial side is the same one as the private hangar lease. And we're just wondering if we can work something out here. We're going to need, for this kind of commercial operation that we're putting in, we're going to need a longer lease. 25 years is pretty short for a multi-million-dollar deal that we're putting together. So that's kind of why we're here and trying to see if we can move that forward.
What type of time frame are you looking at?
We threw something out there. A lot of the long commercial leases where you have guys putting, $4 to $5 to $6 million into an airport, they're going 100 years, sometimes 200 years. We offered 100 with a 100-year re-up, and we discussed it with Dan and said that there was some, maybe somebody didn't like that or whatever. And but we're willing to negotiate some other terms, but we are going to need some longer terms. I mean, when you're putting that kind of money in those kind of buildings together, 25 years, could take us 15, 20 years to try and recoup some of that money. And then to have the lease up at the end of 25 years, I mean, it affects a lot of things like, how nice a building do you want us to build out there? Do you want a 25-year building, or do you want us to build one that's going to last 100 years? So it's just kind of, the meat and potatoes of the thing. And like I said, the lease that we have it's exactly the same lease as a private hangar owner. So obviously it's not really set up for a business.
Okay, thank you.
I was just kind of hoping we could get this on the agenda maybe for the next meeting.
We should probably, we can't really do anything with it this evening, but we can.
I think from a staff's perspective, at least if there's appetite to start, if the term is 25 years, I'm just trying to confirm city's position here as I kind of go into.
I couldn't support 100-year without, not just you. If we had multiple commercial or potential for multiple commercial, but, our airport is never going to be, the length of runway, stuff like that. We don't have that commercial potential to build out. It's recreational flying, and I just can't see us making a commitment for 100 years to one hangar owner. I just think we're You know, that's, I mean, 30 years would be something I would consider, but I don't think
Well,
personally I could do
He's actually
more.
talking about multiple buildings, though, multiple buildings on the same.
We're talking about 5 buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like 30,000 square feet.
No, I understand. I mean, it's really great potential for our airport, but still,
You know, for
the
instance,
amount of commitment the city would have to make for 100 years is beyond where I feel comfortable. I mean, I understand the amount of money that you would be putting into something like that, putting 5 buildings up. I just don't see that as
it
the amount
really,
of money we would have to commit to for that length.
yeah,
of time.
really, the thing is, it more puts a burden on us for the commitment. And it also allows us, if we build a strong business and somebody comes in like a Signature or somebody that's a bigger maintenance, a Duncan or somebody that wants to come in and actually do, you know, I mean, like right now, we don't really have any services out there. There's no maintenance, there's no painting, there's no mechanics, there's no avionics, there's nothing out there. If somebody came along later on, I'm 45, if I got to 65 and my kids didn't want to take it over, it needs to be a saleable entity. Right now, the way it's set up, I mean, you're at the end of the rope. If we go 10, 15 years, I mean, it's not saleable. So it makes it really a struggle to try and find anybody that's going to want to put $4.5 million into the airport. That's really what we're looking at. The lease terms, of course, I mean, you know, there's caveats you could have to that. If we sold it, you'd have to go back and renegotiate the length, or maybe you'd have to start a new lease with and then you could talk to the new prospective buyer. But certainly, like for us, we need to have some kind of, you know, to put that kind of commitment in there. That's really,
I think, I agree with the mayor's comments. I think getting into a 100-year lease term requires a level of plan that I don't feel like we're at that spot to be able to make that commitment. I'm happy to take a look at what other comparable airports would do and recognize you maybe have some challenges of private versus commercial leases, and maybe there's some things you could talk about, but term of lease, I just look at where we sit today for the airport, and I just don't feel like we're in a spot where we're ready to commit to 100 years. Catch us 5, 10 years down the road, and we've had some more development, perhaps, but right now it feels there is a lot of planning that I would feel like we would need to have secured. We're just not in that spot.
Well, we don't have MnDOT commitments for 100 years, and
Right. It opens up, that is a promise we have to keep for 100 years, and there's a tail of things that come with that I would need a lot of information to be comfortable to get there.
well, like I said, we were open to negotiations. So Dan and I had talked, and we came back and said, what about a 50 or a 75-year with a 50-year re-up? You know, they're long enough that, you know, if it didn't work out or whatever, but there needs to be a long enough term. 25 years is really a short for a commercial business with that. I mean, it's one thing when you're building a $160,000 hangar. It's another when you're building $4.5 million.
I appreciate the challenge, but I also hope you appreciate that we're currently in 25-year planning cycles, because that is our current lease term, and to quadruple that is going to take a fair amount of forethought and planning, and, you know, today I'm not prepared to make that decision.
well, yeah, you know, it's definitely something we should put on the agenda to have a deeper discussion with you on, because it isn't on tonight's workshop agenda anyway.
Sure.
So we've opened a conversation, but I think that we should just put it on the next agenda and be able to discuss it a
I
little bit
would
further.
say for Dan, it'd be helpful to have some comps of what do similar airports, and this might push us into the conversation of what is our vision for that airport, right? Do we desire to continue to be a recreational airport, or do we desire it to be something further? And
That's what we're trying to change. That's exactly what we're trying to change, Mara.
But
We're trying to make this into a viable airport, and this is what we've been looking for in that whole area that was slated from the beginning for any kind of commercial business there.
And
Because it's public access to
I
it.
appreciate that desire, but I think we also need to have the conversation of everything that comes with that. And there's a domino that starts if we consider a 100-year lease, and I just want us to have visibility to that, so. some
Well, I mean,
comparable-
if we were gonna talk 100 years, I think I would like to have a plan for the city to get out of the airport and have them be, you know, self-sustaining. If they could, you know, if there was a if there was a path for them to be able to operate at a break even or even make some money, that's one thing. But without MnDOT comping 80 to 90% of what we spend, it would put a terrible burden on the city.
Right.
And, you know, for 5 or 10 years till those leases run out is somewhat of a burden, but to have 80 or 100 years, there's just, that would be the problem I have with it. If I know if the railroad's going through, they get 100-year because, you know, they need that land for that investment. I understand what you're talking about with putting buildings and facilities in. I'd love to have you here, but it's just, we're looking at what the potential cost for the city would be, not income, but costs. You know, if that, that runway is, $4 million now, who knows what it's going to be like 40 years from now. And that could put a terrible burden on if there's just a few people there. We don't know, so.
Seeing some of that modeling, I think, and to your point, maybe that does mean a future exit plan for the city, but I think you have to have that modeled out and discussed, and some comfort level of what that looks like and some buy-in of all stakeholders. It's really going to be tough to make a lease decision in absence of having that bigger conversation.
Well, our business is going to depend on, whether or not you guys, we don't own the land. We've had this discussion. So if you choose not to go past 2,700 feet and it stays 2,700 feet, we have to operate under whatever is given to us because we don't own the land.
Right.
We're willing to put in $4.5 million if we can stay and use whatever is available until that lease is up. So that's what it is. It really isn't us changing or forcing you to do anything. But, whatever is going to be there and available for us, that's going to be really the key here. We don't have control over the land. We can't make you put in a taxiway. We can't make you build a parking lot. We can't make you put in approaches. It would be nice, but we can't make you do any of that. What we can do is with what's existing there and the clientele that's out there already, we can put in a facility so you have proper maintenance. God forbid, you don't want somebody to crash, right, because they didn't fix anything. You have proper maintenance and everything else going on out there. That's kind of what we're trying to get to, plus our own personal needs. We'll have financial services and stuff out there, but that's what we're looking for. So, I would hope that we wouldn't commingle those things because, like I said, we don't own the airport. So, if you choose in 40 years not to do anything with the runway and it finally turns into it doesn't work, we really can't do anything about it. We can vote. That's about it.
So, yeah, we'll put this on the agenda for further discussion
Sure.
then, so.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Donovan, the comp plan update?
Yes, sir. Mayor, members of council, I'd like to workshop a basic comprehensive plan chapters and present to you kind of where we are in this process. You may recall it started in October of 2016 with discussion with how we're going to kind of do the scope of services with Bolton and Mink, and we've continued onward through community surveys, open houses, art in the park staffing, most recently community conversations, and now we are here reaching toward the START area, which is the two public meetings with both Planning Commission and City Council, which shows that we're pretty much on schedule. But tonight I'd like to get from you another further conversation with the land use plan. While Jamie's here, if we could discuss the trail plan and kind of continue to get familiarize yourself with the basic components and get any feedback you want to provide at this point. So this is really kind of we'll still have probably what I'm looking at is later May formal review at a city council meeting. But if we can start from here now, thinking, okay, this is the strong draft, and if you have any feedback, I'd really like to hear it now. But let's start with the parks and the trails map. Take advantage of Jamie before she can run home to her little darlings. And so this was reviewed by the Parks, Lakes, and Trails Commission. We also had open house. What you see is the green bolded lines are what we're looking at is the 2040 trail plan. This largely follows, the collector roads. Additions include a way to get through Cedar Park and then kind of up back toward the lake with a focus on providing more connections to the Hardwood Creek Trail. You'll also notice this area that's going down to Coolingham Park, and also here as a future trail for going around the lake, staying off the North Shore Trail. And so that's a new feature that came out of the task force process. We also, continuing that ring, look at a future trail along 97. And meanwhile, we've had conversations with the county on scoping, a trail along the County Road 50 corridor. This would go to Big Marine Park and then looping back down through Hugo and then connecting to with the concept that it would connect back to Hardwood Creek Trail to have a real big loop. You also notice here a little connection that would be through the Walker property with the land exchange. That would provide that direct connection to the Hardwood Creek Trail. And also, coming in the southwest corner, it's not very imaginative, but basically we can look at, these, extension of the parkway and just these larger roads, having that trail to complete something of a network. Also, we can look toward the county reconstruction of 11th Avenue Southwest and Everton, County Roads 32 and 33, for the installation of a trail there. And so I'd like to, pause now for any kind of feedback for this proposed trail map.
Thanks, Donovan. A couple of questions from me. What constitutes a trail? I mean, are we talking separate than a road, or are we just going to widen the roads and put a bike lane on the side? I mean, is there something that has to be a criteria?
Yeah, sure. Good question. How the city defines these now is a bituminous 10-foot wide off-road facility. So it's separate from the curbed area. And generally, when we have it as a trail, the city does maintain it. They plow it in the winter, and they maintain the surface.
Because I like the idea of adding trails. I think some of these are going to be fairly limited use. The expense to maintain them adds up, and I know in a lot of community I've seen where they'll have I'm going to guess a 6 to maybe 8 foot wide additional width to the road that's bike lane, but it's plowed in the winter by the snow plows. You don't have to do anything else because there's no curb or anything in between. And to me, it just seems like a lot more efficient. Safety wise, that's I guess depending on visibility, but so that was one question that I think we need to have a little further discussion on how we build them. I see 2 trails on here that I'd like to find out a little bit more about. One of them is kind of wrapping around Shields Lake and the Forest Hills Golf area. Is that all city-owned property right now?
There is currently an easement that runs through that. There was easement and even park area that was dedicated as part of a Ty Jeans, I think it was Ty, or one of the Jeans brothers development that didn't get city approval for, but prior to that, during that development review process, he quitclaimed acreage, it's about 3.5 acres, to the city. So that exists now, and actually one day Jamie and I kind of did a little four-wheeling and through there, and actually it does kind of lead up to, this is even city right-of-way through here by Tim McKenzie's old house.
Right, yeah, there's like a little fishing pier or something right there.
Yeah, and so
but that's actually like
it's a jeep trail. It's muddy right now. I mean, it's
okay. So it isn't just pure swamp. There is potential to put a trail through there.
correct.
Okay, great. And I think it was Commissioner Langness that kind of pointed out the path for the trail north and North Shore. That new one that would attach kind of to behind Camp Park. I think that's a great idea. But I also think that, you know, that really makes a nice reliever road to take a lot of traffic or potential traffic that's on North Shore Drive now. If we could look at somehow to, in future road plans, to get some type of reliever street, something there, you know, obviously something that's gonna be higher than 30 miles an hour so that it would help detour people from using North Shore Drive and using that road instead.
Well, I mean, certainly not,
Obviously way beyond its capacity and.
yeah, I mean, this is, you envision simply as a trail now, so that'd be a really different conversation, but, you know, I will
And it
agree
may
with
not
you,
have
the
to
need is
follow that
there.
exact path, but, you know, somewhere around there and having, you know, one or two north-south roads connecting to it, to get people off of North Shore and get them back to the freeway, back to downtown, wherever they're trying to go, quicker and safer than what we have now. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, just the trail along 97 south of, well, that would be Clear Lake and then tying into, it looks like it's going to run along the freeway. There's no land there. Is that just going along the road? Is that what that would be?
Yeah, it's conceived of, you know, on Eureka there.
Elmcrest or Eureka, yeah, whatever.
No, I meant the part on 97.
Oh, along here?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this just is a, you know, is a future plan, the concept that would, yeah, run along the road.
'Cause
On the
isn't-
road?
Doesn't the county have plans to
Redo.
widen 97?
I mean, yeah, we do envision that becoming a four-laner at some point, but, you know, perhaps there can be an off-road facility.
But I see what you're talking about, right past the 97
Yeah, there's
sign.
a, you know, where the,
It's just kind of going through the middle of the.
Yeah, there's nothing, I
swampy
mean,
area.
there's the daycare center and stuff there, but there's no land.
Over here?
I think we're talking about the wetlands.
At least we don't own any land that I know of.
Yeah.
Check on that.
So prioritization of these, I know it becomes a whole different conversation, but just an observation that I believe it's Everton over on the far west is a really, with more and more development along that stretch, and the current even just walking facilities are pretty, they're terrible.
Isn't that where the apartments?
You mean, here you're saying?
Say that again?
Yeah, you mean on Everton?
Yes.
From like Gateway Green northward to Broadway?
Yes, and
Yeah.
that's even pre-full build-out. And so access, I hear from residents on that side, access to get in is a problem and challenging and not always safe, so. Something to think about in prioritization. When we look at this in the future, it would also be helpful, I don't know if this is possible, but to differentiate where we have existing easements versus where we have easement issues. I think just me, it'd be helpful to have that picture because that kind of gives an idea of amount of how much effort it's going to take to make that happen and maybe present a picture of reasonableness of could we make it happen? I know the goal is to be aspirational to have a plan, but somebody who wants to kind of see a path on how are we going to get there, be helpful to see where we have easement versus where we don't.
Sure.
So Hardwood Creek is a regional trail that's completely cared for by the county. Are we planning any of these to be turned over as regional trails? Or, I mean, we've got an awful lot of trails coming up in our system here. And like you pointed out, 11th Avenue in Everton, the county's going to rebuild. Are we going to be able to, turn those over to the county to care for as well?
I don't believe that's the case, right, Ryan?
Washington County's, I guess, policy would basically be in line with what was done with Broadway. So if the city had the desire to have pedestrian facilities within their right-of-way, at the end of within the agreed or executed agreement, it would become the city's ownership and maintenance of those facilities. They do have some cost share policies as well, so, new stuff, there's I can't remember exactly what the portion is, but they do deflect some of the upfront costs. But at the end, if they're gonna be there, they're gonna require the city to own and maintain those facilities.
Well, we need to come up with some plan to pay for them and to maintain them. That's a lot of miles of trail, millions of dollars, and it doesn't last forever. So I think what we got here is a great idea, but we also have to have a way to pay for it. Go ahead.
But I, like Councilman Bain, would like to see where we actually have the easements. I mean, it doesn't do much good to plan a trail on a road you don't own.
Or if it's gonna cost a lot to purchase that access, yes,
So some of this I would look at is their dream wish, right?
for sure.
That's what this is.
Yeah,
Yep,
I mean,
for sure.
rightfully so, a lot of it is. But that's what the Parks and Rec group will use, or utilize us to chase grants in those situations, or if we have applications come forward, we require those easements at that time. Quick Trip and all that there, we required all that. I mean, we have plenty of right-of-way acquired there, part of their site plan. If this would have been in place, you might have been able to even acquire another 10 feet saying that you wanted to accommodate a trail someday. So if that stuff's not there, there's really no guidance to the people that are reviewing applications. So that's how I look at this. Do I see any of this, half of this being built in my lifetime? No. Some of that stuff that we've talked about going up through the old North Shore Trail, I've talked about with Jamie at first. I go, well, don't go for the big shebang at the beginning here with the bituminous trail. What's wrong with a gravel or a wood chip trail, that you could have, some off-road use, but over time you constructed a base, then maybe sometime in the future, let's just say we did have some subdivision out there. Let's get them to connect into it and pay a portion part of the, the project. So that's kind of how I look at these things. Some other areas obviously make sense, but without having this plan, then when you apply for those grants and applications or cooperative agreement projects with MnDOT or the county, if they don't see something like this, then they're like, well, you guys haven't had the conversation. How do you even know you want this? Did you go through the process? That's a lot of,
So when the county does eventually when they do their expansion on 97, which eventually will come, would they look at a plan like this and consider saying, well,
So MnDOT is the road authority of 97. Certainly we go through an area over there that has some pretty significant and high valued wetlands, to the point when we pursued a entrance or gateway sign of Forest Lake that, whoa, let's stay away from that, because when we were told the process that would be required there. So even in the event MnDOT does go forward with a road widening someday in the future, they're gonna go through a very strenuous environmental process. At that time, we want to engage very closely with them. Hey, we want another whatever so many feet so we can incorporate.
so we
the
can
trail.
do this?
We would piggyback off MnDOT.
Okay.
And then part of their project, they would have a cost share policy, just kind of like we did with the 6197. We would know where our costs estimated as we go. So let's just say it was not feasible, we might back out, have that opportunity. And maybe you don't actually have that connection to the wetland area of 97 when it's all said and done and you actually went through the process, and it's more or less some connection up from the south at Hornsby. Just again, because environmental things, but.
And if I could offer that, in some ways, these comp plans are kind of marketing documents for cities. This kind of shows what the city values. And for this kind of trail system, for 2040, we could be talking about a third more people in Forest Lake. And I think it's also important when people are thinking about moving to a community, they're looking at the schools, but they're also looking at recreational facilities. What things can they take kids to, or what things can they do with the family. And trails do represent something that's kind of all ages use.
In definition of trail, I wouldn't just hold it to a bituminous surface. I would more or less think along the lines of something 8 feet in width or abouts right in there. Obviously, our sidewalk widths are 6 foot or less. To meet ADA standards on a sidewalk, you need to be 5 foot. So, old school, we were building 4 foot sidewalks. Now we're building 6 foot sidewalks. That way, Public Works equipment can get down them if they have to snow plow them or clear things out, but, whether it's bituminous concretes or gravel or wood chips, I still would consider it a trail. Obviously, once you get into certain types of grants, that definition gets more dialed in because federal money comes into play, and then you gotta have clearance off the sides and stuff like that. But I consider on the south side of 11th Avenue a trail, and I know Donovan and I have talked about this too, but because it was concrete, and it had to be concrete, otherwise we could never have constructed it to meet ADA grades because it was so flat through there. So we had to use concrete to be able to meet all the requirements of the funding that it came with it. And went as wide as we possibly could because the right-of-way was very narrow through there. So I would just more or less think of a trail in the terms of somewhere around 8 foot. Regional trails will always be 10 feet or greater. We are trying to negotiate with Washington County about having along County Road 50 a designated trail. Currently there's one down at 170th, is that the Glacial Hills Trail? That's identified in the Metropolitan Council. But we always said, development's not gonna get down to that point. Why can't we have another one designated County Road 50? That'd be somebody else taking care of it. And you'd have a nice, really great loop between County Road 50, Manning Avenue, and the Hardwood Creek Trail then. So, a big, long, for even experienced bikers, that'd be a great loop. That's the things we've been working on.
Ryan, thanks for your explanation. It was good because it clears up a lot of things. Thanks.
All right.
All right, I'd like to move on to the land use plan, which is, we discussed this at the workshop last month, and I want to, I've had some improvements, some changes, based on council feedback, and I want to check on a few other things. First, I'd like to check on the, just as far as a question, if I could point to there's a area, I'm going to circle it here in red to ask, should we treat this area similar to, those other areas that are just east of Harrow? Boom, right here. I'll focus in on. And so this area right here, there's a kind of just north of County Road 50. During our last conversation, we did not include this in this low, medium density residential. So I just want to confirm that this, but including it would also give us a straight line along here, and it would kind of be the same concept where we're expanding the MUSA boundary to both sides of Harrow like that. Would you agree with that? Does that make
I don't know
sense?
why it wasn't included before, but
Yeah,
I think, that way you get a straight line, it looks nice and clean.
Sure. So next, I'd like to move down.
Can we, before you move down there, as long as we're right at County Road 50 there, and, you move the medium density onto the other side of Harrow, but why isn't the rural residential on both sides of County Road 50? Right now it's white agricultural. And I'm just wondering, there's a few houses on that side anyway, but I just thought we weren't going to use roads as borders for changing zoning, but, partway in between.
Certainly, that's a good point. I don't have an answer for that one, really. I think it's an oversight.
Okay, I'd like to see that change for sure anyway.
Sure. Also, if I could point to the mixed-use areas that somewhat match the access points on the west side of 61. So we have that here, and then here around by 190th. and then kind of more linear fashion here from 185th down to 180th. Does that represent what we did speak about? I didn't do a similar kind of more nodal, method on this other side because we hadn't discussed that. But I'd like to get some clarity from council on, okay, does this seem to represent how we want the mixed use areas on this west side of 61?
I guess I'd rather see those as highway business or general business. I don't know why we have highway business on one side of 61, and then on the other side, we're looking at mixed use. And then we have some, what's the brown, like low density?
Up here?
Residential. No,
Oh, this?
right there.
Yeah, that's just low, medium density residential, which,
I don't see a purpose for any residential along Highway 61 corridor. I would like to, see that first 500 feet back on both sides of that at least as more of a commercial corridor. And I would also like to look at, doing kind of the same thing along Fenway. Maybe to a lesser degree, more of a mixed use, but I think Fenway, if 180th takes off with a freeway access, which isn't going to happen tomorrow, but having Fenway as a parkway to connect between 180th and Highway 97, I would like to see, an area there that is maybe 500 feet on each side of it or 1,000 feet on each side of it, more business than allowing it to develop with, sporadic residential developments in there.
and that would be, you envision, that would be a mixed use?
I
Actually have, the flexibility for residential or business, because
I guess at minimum, I don't really know what the specific mixed-use designation is. To me, mixed use, if it's residential, it's high-density residential, which I don't believe out there, anybody's gonna want, a pizza parlor underneath with, 2 levels of housing above it or something like that. I think there's enough room that, we can have, commercial developments and residential developments. I just, that corridor is gonna develop, and I guess I don't know which specific definition it's gonna be. Whether it's, but, somehow commercial along the front, residential behind it is what I would envision. And I don't see the same kind of intermixture of residential and commercial along that corridor. When it starts growing, it's all going to be new. It's not going to be Woodbury, but it's going to be something along that commercial all the way up the corridor, and then as you turn off on the side streets, that's where I can see the residential. So if that's what you call mixed use, I'm fine with it, but I don't know how to better break that down.
Sure. I'd see a certain advantage of that, because right now we already having conversations with potential developers around how do you extend Fenway southward with asphalt, and if we kind of incentivize it by providing greater development density, I think that hastens that progression southward. Mm-hmm. I can see that. So yeah, we can accommodate more of that mixed use. And were you saying that? And I don't, and I think this is something just we provide an option to have this business. But do you see this as mixed use all along this east side here as well? Or is it,
Well, I don't understand. I don't know. Do you have the definition of what mixed use is? I mean, I understand the words mixed use, but I just don't know what zoning definition mixed use is versus highway business versus highway commercial. I mean,
Sure.
To me, you could lump all three of those together and make one zoning designation and simplify it. But I don't want to say, yeah, I think it's mixed use when I don't know what that definition is, and there's nothing really in here defining it, fairly clear, but, we got general business, highway commercial, business park, there's so many different ones that, I don't know why we're, shoehorning that many different definitions into, that area. I mean, that's what I don't know. I mean, residential, you got rural, you got low density, you got medium, you got high density. I mean, that's pretty simple. So, I mean, that comes out clear. This to me isn't clear to me, so you'd have to help me define that.
Yeah, I mean, some of this is, the different slices of this, I think, try to provide more certainty for property owners, for developers. And the main difference between mixed use and, say, the general business is that residential component. And so kind of what we get on the west side is more flexibility with introducing residential. On the east side of 61, it's more straight, business oriented. And that's kind of, that's a big generalization, but I think that's what I can offer now.
Well, I think it's going to be more beneficial to mirror the same thing on both sides of the road.
Okay.
Especially a road as busy as Highway 61. And obviously, we're going to want to promote Fenway as a parkway if hopefully when we get the exit on 180th as well. So I really don't see, residential as a component within 500 feet of the road. But obviously that whole area is got good potential for residential growth. But I would rather see a vast majority of that land go for commercial / business. We're too far off the freeway at that point. I mean, Columbus is going to benefit with the freeway access and the big box retail stores there. But, the other businesses and, the campuses, the sites that, are going to need a little bit more acreage are going to be closer to here. I mean, I don't see strip malls and shopping malls, but I do see, growth on 61 and Fenway both. So, how do you designate that, I guess, is what I would say.
Sure.
Personally, I'd like to mirror both sides of each of the roads. I think that's only logical. I mean, we don't have any actual geographic features out there that limit us. I mean, we're not a lake on one side and something on the other. I mean, it's a road through farmland, so I don't know why we're not doing the same on both sides.
Sure. Yeah, I'd recommend that we do go for flexibility then, and just say mixed use and write in a way that, it could be just much later in writing development standards that, areas, the frontage on major collectors is devoted to more commercial uses, so that, and so we don't have the residential subdivisions plopping up there. Also, what makes me think about in the future is, what in the future of autonomous vehicles, how does that change frontage, and how does that, and we're already changing. I'm hearing from some business owners regarding office space that people are not renting office space like they used to because they're doing their work. They don't need that kind of visibility. I mean, there are a lot of questions there that much larger than we can answer, and this year, maybe next comp plan might be a time we'll grapple with that one.
In a mixed use area, would a community college or anything like that fit, or what zoning would that go into?
It's almost like special district or institutional, and we haven't really expanded the institutional. I'll get into that a little bit later. I mean, we've city focused, we have, but the business park maybe has that. That's the purple area, because it's meant to be more like research park. I can't recall if that is a permitted use there, but
Okay.
But
that
I
would
did
be another use that would be great right off of 61 or, in the south end of Forest Lake. I mean, with Leela, with North Lakes Academy, I mean, we've got quite a few schools here. We don't have a technical college or a community college, but I see great potential for something like that coming in, and let's, see if we can get a logical designation for something like that as well.
Sure.
Was there, so I agree with the comments on keeping the consistency along 61. During the community conversations and during the task force, was there a articulated reason why we had some residential sprinkled in? I just want to make sure I understand the reason why it is the way it is before.
As in, like, as in this?
The pockets of residential that are still there.
Well,
Was
it's-
that preserved for a reason, or was it just not thought about, or I'm just,
These relate to where there's somewhat proximity to 61 access. These are all vacant, kind of fields, single-family homes at the moment.
okay.
And there's also this idea that, it might be nice to reserve areas close to the what's currently a golf course, which at this point, by all indications, it's going to remain as a golf course. Again, looking at that, some perhaps, the golf course ringed with residential. So that was some consideration there. And then some of the areas too, like down here, we're getting it, more difficult if property isn't so deep, it's difficult to, put in the commercial use. So,
Switch gears and if you can scroll the map up to the lakes,
sure.
and that's fine. Most of what you have around Forest Lake and Clear Lake, to me, looks like you're designating it low-density residential. And that's about the highest density, low density I've ever seen, because those are houses on top of houses all the way around the lake. So why isn't that a high-density residential? And, or, I see a lot of lakes now where, condominiums, other things. I mean, farther out on Second and Third Lake, I mean, if somebody did want to build, a 10 or 15, 20 unit building, they just can't right now. But I would think that would be maybe more desirable than, shoehorning a few more houses in somewhere.
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest restriction is infrastructure. City water only goes about to Castlewood here, and then to the Gone development at the Sunrise River on the north end. So you have this large area that is served by sanitary sewer, which is a great benefit, but it makes it much tougher to build high density, stacked or else even attached. Part of that is once you get beyond 3 attached units, you're required to sprinkle it. And so you have, and there are some means to, some advances in technology where they can provide the pressure and some sort of, reservoir to sprinkle buildings. But that's.
Well, they have plenty of water available at the lake right next to them, so. To me, it just isn't logical to be calling that all low-density residential when half our population lives within a quarter mile of the lake that we're looking at. I mean, that's all built out, and it's, to me, a high-density residential area. And so, I don't know what's the reasoning for that?
Well, I think it's primarily the building type. I mean, there's single-family homes without, there's some exceptions around Castlewood, and then, as mentioned, like up here, the apartment building. But there's single-family homes, and, a lot of them are the 50-foot wide lots. The historical cabin sites. I don't know, in some ways we haven't envisioned it, and also, I think a lot of residents do appreciate what they have there now. I mean, density might say that it's, per dwellings per acre. It has some higher numbers. I haven't done any calculations on that, actually how many dwelling units per acre. But there are a collection of single-family homes, and that's how we define it as low density.
So anything that's single-family homes is low density, no matter how.
Is it zoned that way today? Is that map today yellow?
Yeah, that basically represents a single-family zoning district. So, I mean, you have a minimum, in these areas, a minimum lot size of a little over half an acre. So it wouldn't qualify as high density if you were going to create a new lot, which happens only rarely. Because most of them are lots that are 5, 7, 10,000 square feet.
So
Yes.
this would not provide any opportunity for any other, restaurants, businesses that may, if Aqua wanted another facility on the lake, this would not allow for that, correct?
No, it's, they're there as a conditional use and kind of grandfathered in.
Father?
Ryan wanted to say something.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I just want to bring up the point, obviously, I'm not most competent about this map than all the other stuff, but this is the most important map in the comp plan on building the rest of the chapters off of, because you look at the densities, that's how we calculate sewer and water then, right? I think a lot of valid points were brought up tonight, but I don't think any progress was made, because we seem to be having so many different conversations at every different meeting about this page, that I think we need to have a meeting with decision makers to finalize this. Maybe the mayor, a planning commission member, yourself, Donovan, maybe Jane, and some people from the task force groups. But this has to get finalized this month. Otherwise, we're not going to make deadlines. This sheet is dragged on too long now to not have this conversation.
Well, I'm available, set something up and we'll be there.
City engineers dropping the hammer. No, I appreciate that. I mean, because I'll maybe if I could just summarize some other things.
Because the last thing I want is to have somebody told to go make a bunch of changes again, right? And then we bring it forth at a public hearing, then we have a huge uproar because all these property owners that have seen the zoning to date, or what we discussed through all those meetings, Fenway idea is a great idea that we just brought up tonight, but I don't ever recall that talked about once. And I just kind of sat as a liaison and listened on this one because I'm just kind of been sitting in the weeds waiting to what to do, what we have to do in concurrence with this plan. But if that's a change, you can certainly bet the Taylors will want to be involved on that conversation.
It's already happened.
If they're for it, then great. But I just don't want to come to a public hearing and then we put the axe in it for a while.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the only thing I would like to comment on is, I don't know that those lakes lend themselves to what you would call high density or condos or anything like that. It isn't like, like we're up on Mille Lacs or on Gull Lake or something like that can accommodate a building that might have 50 or 60 residents all with boats and that kind of thing. I don't see it there.
There is some potentially larger stuff, especially out in Third Lake, where they have nice access to it, but those condominiums would be built several hundred feet away from shore.
With an access.
The Halbert property out in that area,
Yeah, I mean, I see a change in, people's lifestyles where, they want a maintenance-free, they may not even want to go on the lake, they may not want to own a boat, but I just see a really beautiful lake and a place that they'd like to live in, in a building where they can drive their car into their underground stall and, have a workout room, have all that, but, I think the lake is what really sells that. And am I saying there are going to be 30 or 40 units like that? No, maybe 2 or 3, but, in the conversation we had before, why aren't we looking at a long-term plan to extend water to where there's sewer already? It never made sense to me why they, when they did, why they ran sewer around without putting water at the same time. But there's thousands of wells out there that are getting old and failing, and, so that's not a comp plan conversation, but if the water ends at Castlewood now to move that out even a mile and, be able to get, to be able to offer that potential, because there are quite a few older houses where, it may require a developer to buy 4 or 5 of them to put up a decent unit, but, the payback for them would be there, so. Conversation to be had later, I agree with that. I don't understand, how that could be classified as low-density residential, just because there's so many homes in there that, to me, it's urban, or, you know, it's residential, it's not low density, but I guess that's just more of a classification in the map anyway. Any other comments or questions?
You know, the point is, I don't know how we could ever change anything there. It's already there, you know? And I think I can see the low density would be part of the problem because of the water situation there. So I don't see changing it, especially in this part of the game. Because nothing's really gonna happen there. Be very small things happening there.
Well, you got that whole Tim's Marina area, there's a couple others that, you know, have potential anyway. But yeah, for the comp plan purposes, I'm fine with the way that's laid out if the definition of low-density residential meets what we have here now.
If I could point out, there's a small expansion up here off 235th to accommodate, you know, future homes. That would be expansion of the municipal boundary there. In consideration for economic development, this area off Broadway has also been expanded, a commercial area. In response to the request for a definition for the area that was, you know, the southwest corner, that renamed as highway business, to kind of reflect more of, you know, the city's aspirations for that area and provide a definition here that basically focuses on warehousing, wholesaling, e-commerce, light manufacturing, and data centers as uses for that area. And this is just general future land use. And it's those businesses that require the proximity to a regional transportation infrastructure, i.e. the interstate. And of course, couldn't have some retail, wholesale, or administrative offices attached to them.
All right, sounds good to me.
And the also on this map, I'd like to get a confirmation. This is in the 2008 map. This area here, right near the intersection of North Shore Trail and Highway 97, was designated as public institutional, with this idea that it would be a second fire department. It's still vacant land, and this is neighborhood commercial, which is that kind of mauve color there. And my conversations about every year or so, I ask, you know, fire chief, you know, is that still something that the fire department wants to hold on to as an idea for, you know, a future station? And he says we'd like, you know, yes, they'd like to hold on to that. Actually, staffing that as a volunteer fire department station presents its own challenges, but you know, but right now it's a future land use to hold that land in for potential. I'd like to get a confirmation from City Council that's still your desire.
Yeah.
Okay. And then also just south of, you know, kind of the airport approach, or southeast of the airport approach runway, the currently owned city compost site and area as a potential future public works facility. Also, I'd like to get confirmation that's also part of your vision.
I think that we have to have that discussion with Ryan. I would like to see a public works built where we have a water treatment plant and possibly tower, depending on where our city growth is. But again, I think that parcel there has a lot more potential as highway commercial. It's probably the highest and driest piece of land on 61.
Isn't that encumbered by the airport?
A portion of it is, but I think, especially now that the runway is moved down farther, I think that may even change a little bit. But yeah, there's a no-build zone on the kind of the front quarter of that blue, but I think the rest of it is, you could build on without any problem.
Okay, so I guess that's to be determined on where that could be. I mean, you know, I just look at, you know, where its current location is, that it is much, you know, as soon as we can pull those, you know, cell antennas off the water tower, we can pull that down and really potentially let that whole area be, you know, high-density residential. But so we'll continue that as a conversation of, you know, for a future location to be determined. And also, I'd like to,
Can we pause for a second and go back to that question? So is it problematic if we were to only designate the portion that's got the airport restriction on it as restricted and open? I mean, just because we were to change the zoning doesn't mean we necessarily have to make the decision tonight or
Yeah, I mean,
in
even
next
if the
year about
restrictions
that.
are, we could still
Is there,
zone it there.
right, I mean, wouldn't we give ourselves more flexibility by changing the zoning to as
To what's restricted.
to less restricted and just give ourselves the option?
Yeah, because you should be able to plot that out where that, what's the word, Sam?
It's RPZ.
RPZ?
So is there a downside or a limitation for us? So if we did decide we wanted that to be a public works site, we could still use it for that, correct? And this was kind of our opportunity to broaden those options of if we did, to the mayor's point, make a different location, then we've got the zoning set and we're ready to do something else with it. Just seems like it's a more flexible option than benchmarking it or holding it as is.
I agree.
so to kind of continue a mixed use, say like a mixed use or a, you know, a business use north of here for the future land
Yeah,
use
so
plan.
Donovan, where you got your pointer right now, that gold colored piece next to it, what is that designated?
That's medium density residential. Yeah, it's kind of vestige from the 2008 plan, and
And then next to that, the darker purple is,
that's the business park. So it's like the research park, more like larger corporate campus type use.
they go together well.
That's really what that gold area should be too.
Yeah, I think so.
So go,
That's really not a place for the residential. If you know, if you have that whole area should be that purple color as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree with you. The highway commercial in front and
Yep.
business park, whatever you want to.
okay.
I don't like purple and gold.
As long as a combination.
So also, I'm actually running through a few different chapters here, and this land use plan really is kind of the workhorse of the comp plan, as Ryan mentioned. So each went through community facilities. Now if we could shift to basically the economic development or economic competitiveness chapter, has a component with the largest change is this updates focus on increased acreage for commercial, industrial, mixed use, future land uses. And I calculated there's about a 75% increase in that business, industrial, or mixed use, future land use category from this compared to the 2030. So basically we have a lot more red. And that seems to be kind of, the city's long-term approach to kind of having that good commercial and residential mix. And I could go through kind of other changes, as far as, with housing, with water resources, which is generally just an update of data. And the transportation, largely, the map looks largely the same. There's some small changes I can point out that relate more to, what we've learned in the last 10 years. For instance, there's no longer a north-south collector that would run into 11th because of wetland issues. That was in the last plan. That's kind of where the BP is on the Highway 97 right there. So that's gone. The highway down here where we focus a lot of attention on the transportation improvements, there actually really is not much change other than straightening out 180th to make sure that it just ties directly into Highway 61. And there is, so those are the changes. So that's somewhat minor. Still we have, the headwaters continuing out to Elmcrest, et cetera. But I'm free to take any questions if council wants to kind of follow up on other questions or do you want to dig back into other individual chapters?
Just, the economic growth and you don't have to go back to the other slide, but it's a small area. But where 97 and North Shore kind of come together, that's always been a concern, traffic safety wise. And I don't know what we can do in the comp plan, for small improvements like that. MnDOT's got it on the radar, this, that, but, can we put, micromanage, we want a stoplight here, or we need something at this point or that point. I don't know if that is relevant to the people that are looking at this, or if we can, at that point, take that back to MnDOT and work with them on that.
Well, I think the comp plan here is useful in a way that Ryan just referenced, that, if there's language potentially used for chasing grants. And Ryan, do you think there's...
So within the transportation section, I don't know if you guys have seen the whole chapter or not, but there's another map that has almost 30 bubbles, numbered 1 through whatever, and this is one of those locations, and it specifically calls out in a paragraph of some issues at this intersection. So just looking at this map doesn't obviously give you the whole big picture of the comp plan, transportation section. Like I said, I can't remember the total number, but it's over 30 bubbles that identify issues or concerns and whether they need a study or, something like that. Obviously, we just can't push a signal. We'd have to go through the control evaluation, process, like an ICE study. But, we've been working with MnDOT on that intersection closely. And, a lot of people have brought up a lot of good points on some concepts MnDOT has presented. Whether we, widen those shoulders in the area to maintain pedestrian facilities, or not just come in with a left turn lane, but also look at the vertical curve through there, because your sight distance is very limited with the traffic coming from the east. So, I think that if you saw that document, you would see some of those things that are highlighted than what this map shows. What this map shows is just your jurisdiction classifications.
Okay.
Do we have access to that map, or is that something?
Yeah, we produce it during the community conversations, and
Maybe you could just forward it to the whole council.
Yeah,
and we can
something,
Sure.
just a link we can look at our own time and bring back questions.
sure.
All right, anything else, Donovan?
Just to wrap up on that, there's conversation of once the whole draft plan is assembled, all the chapters are together, we'll work on getting a digital feedback component online, so everybody can kind of review the whole plan and at their leisure kind of go through the thing fine tooth comb, and then there will be an opportunity to provide feedback on those specific sections, because there's a lot of information in this plan, and it's probably one of those things you might want to sit down, by yourself and go through some of the stuff, answer questions. We want to put a mechanism in there where council and residents are able to provide feedback to staff on certain parts of the comp plan. So we're working on developing that tool and that mechanism. So that will go out when the comp plan final draft is assembled.
All right.
So we're
Thanks,
looking,
Dan.
yeah, thank you, Dan. You have to remind me on that one. So we're looking at the final draft chapters produced in the second week of April, taking it to the Planning Commission at their second meeting on April 25th, and then looking to take it to formal council review on on May 21st. So we have a full month there for more feedback, for more consideration, before we take it to, hopefully final council adoption in May. May 21st.
All right, sounds good. Any other questions for Donovan?
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on. Ryan, the Highway 97 access study?
Dan, can you pull it up or not?
Yeah, I'm taking it out of my email right now. You may want to start. It's going to take a second with it being 17 mega. Oh, there we go. Just opened up.
So basically tonight, I was just gonna go give you an overview of the document that MnDOT prepared. Staff's been working with MnDOT, I would say, for the last couple of years. We've also had the school district involved in some of our meetings as well. But basically, just to come up with a plan or a future vision of what some improvements along 97 could be completed. The study basically included going from Trunk Highway 61, or US 61, eastward to Manning Avenue, and MnDOT basically did majority of the work with direction from staff, and obviously we're in the review period now, so looking for any feedback you guys might provide so we can provide that back to MnDOT, but basically, the primary goal of the Highway 97 access studies provide overall access to existing conditions and develop access strategies moving forward. So on the first page of the document, it talks about some existing traffic. Some of my direct comments to MnDOT on that were to verify some of that traffic that they've used in here, which was different on other studies in count, so we are having them verify some of the stuff there. Move to page 2. Basically, they've created a summary chart of the crash history, so what you see is only shown up through December 31st, 2015, even though we know that other accidents have occurred, but that's just how often the crash data information is updated. Obviously, there's quite a few of them, and then, in the boxes, obviously self-explanatory what fatal is, just kind of, their abbreviations. I didn't know until I asked a transportation guy to look it up, and they're in lingo world too, but Sev A is considered, that's incapacity and injury, so injury serious enough to prevent normal activity for at least 1 day, such as massive blood loss, broken bones, etc. B is kind of highlighted as injuries that are equivalent or evident at the scene, but not serious enough to prevent normal activity, such as cuts, bruises, or limping. And then C is non-visible injuries, but there are complaints of pain or momentary unconsciousness, such as headaches. So that helps clarify, I guess, what some of that stuff is. Other points, on this, a category. So Highway 97 has been placed in the Access Management Category 5B, according to MnDOT's Access Management Manual. This is subcategory is intended for areas outside the urban core and either urbanized or planned for urbanization over the next 20 years with a full range of urban services, especially local supporting street network. So one of my comments on this page was, well, the area between Trunk Highway 61 and Harrow Avenue and the city, in my mind, would be considered well within the core. So please clarify some of that. Should that have a different category moving forward? Page 3 of the study. MnDOT's here started providing some recommendations for driveway allowances by their category, again, 5B. So there's 4 bullet points there that kind of summarize some of those. I really kind of get into some other stuff on the next page, on page 4, where they start providing an access inventory of the existing conditions. So obviously we have a lot of access points in this section of 97, but they bring up some stuff and techniques on how to address that, and some of my comments to MnDOT have been the areas identified as not meeting the recommended public street intersection spacing will most likely never change between approximately Imperial Avenue to July because of all the existing wetlands and low area through this area. As for long-term planning, when density increases west and east of this area, how are the 34 existing access points really going to be addressed? Techniques identified really don't provide a pathway for improvement within this area of 97. And then I also asked, are there any cost share programs to go through these property modifications? So I think sometimes when you do a study, you know, you use some of the same language they might have had from another one. So, but I don't think that's consistent with this situation in reality. So if you're going to have stuff in a study, let's make sure we can actually achieve it physically or with reality too. So that's why what that comment really was referencing. Page 5, we really get into some of the areas they've talked about key improvements. So there's a number of them there, but I also asked, why aren't we outlining left turn, right turn lanes at Harrow Avenue, adding left turn, right turn lanes at Heath Avenue, and existing note, close high-low on north side, add west high-low access. And I kind of reference back into some of the diagrams, but it's, you know, certainly things that we've talked about, but, you know, you show all this stuff in here. Let's make it a comprehensive document. So kind of just going down the intersections of why some things weren't noted versus that were.
Ryan, can I pause you for a sec? How different is that change from what was talked about in some of the open houses? Were these the same options
Yep.
that were discussed?
So well, we'll get into figures, but it does address, I did make sure that if it didn't address an intersection, they forgot about one, or if they proposed to close one, why not this one versus that one? So this was, you know, following a lot of that, so it was consistent with that, other than it didn't have those left turns. You know, I wanted to be more accurate than not, instead of just saying some areas where certainly, why would you do any improvements at Harrow Avenue and not do a left turn lane, right?
Right. Okay.
So, question, recommendations, but a left turn at Castlewood Golf Course entrance, would it be better to try and get a light at Harrow and have no left turn so that, you know, people would have to just do a 180 at that light and come back? I mean, if we're trying to limit the amount of accesses and everything else, I mean, to me, I would rather see, you know, some type of traffic control device at Harrow and close the left turn completely.
So you would promote a median down 97 between Harrow and to the west?
I don't know if a median's necessary, but I just don't know. I mean, no left turn sign could be just as good, or, you know, some type of stripe so that they can't do that. I don't know if really there's nearly enough traffic just taking a left onto the golf course to really make that a factor on our decisions, but I mean, prioritizing some type of control device, something at Harrow. There's, you know, that's 365 days a year people are using that.
So with Harrow Avenue, you know, we went through I guess a very mini traffic little study and did a 24-hour traffic log.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I wanted people to drive through to try to see what we could do, and we still didn't meet signal warrants or, you know, an intersection control warrant. So, you know, obviously traffic's not there, but at some point we're gonna meet the warrants for either a signal or a roundabout. You know, at that time, we certainly would have better access than to turn around. I think they have some track from history on traffic accidents that have occurred at the golf course, and that was something that they did show in that concept. So if you look closely, it actually showed the left turn at the golf course, and then it showed the turn lanes at Harrow Avenue, and then it showed the closures or the work, eastward. But it was not something really talked a lot much because, we had a lot of work going west and east of Harrow, but a lot of the focus was on Harrow at that time. So, but basically it was because they had a history of accidents there, and that's why, certainly if we had a controlled intersection at Harrow, which would provide a turning movement, you can certainly not provide that left turn lane. But if it wasn't median through there or anything, you should anticipate left turn lanes, turns are still gonna happen.
So, just asking the question,
Yep.
whatever we can do to increase the safety along there. I think people that drive there, for the most part, are well aware of how dangerous that is, and we've had police, doing a lot more speed enforcement in that area just because of some issues. So, I guess biggest bang for the buck if it means closing one and getting a control device at the other, rather than.
I don't think they've ever proposed to close it. They just wanted to provide a left turn, so when you're going through, you're not stopping traffic or that potential rear end.
But I mean, a left turn lane there would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and
It certainly would be more than that, but
Yeah.
but if we got it in the bonding bill funded, we did, in that bonding bill, we did include that to be part of the project, right? They do have traffic counts. I guess I'm trying to verify how you read it. Injury occurred here. Looks like I don't know what D is, but a C. So on the 12th page of that, there is a specific traffic count movements right there. And I don't know what the 20 means. I can look into that further, but just give you a better idea of what's gone on there. So I'll jump to page 6, and here we kind of start getting into some of the roads further out, and then some driveway accesses. I don't necessarily agree with all their comments, such as if access was closed at 214th or Irish Avenue, or both, then improvements such as left turn lanes at 215th Street and Iverson would need to be identified, discussed. As they talk about closing specific intersections, but then no improvements west or eastbound or westbound of that, so you're gonna then create an issue just in a different spot. So just trying to get, I guess, some better, challenge them on some of their recommendations, and then make sure we still provide efficient emergency routes, and then, routes for residents as well. So let's just go to page 8 of the PDF, which is the first figure. So here, they talk about the 3 houses potentially with the orange dots. So, I've reviewed it to that level that, we should, look at alternative access points for these properties. But I suggest to revise to 2 because one of those properties is landlocked and its only access would be to 97. So we don't want to leave a property that doesn't have public access to road right away. It'd be great if somebody came in and purchased, 2 of the lots and rebuilt 1 house in the ideal world, but I don't always envision that occurring. On the next page, obviously this gets to be one of the busiest sections you see with all the orange dots and several driveways and some roads that we could potentially make some revisions there. So I necessarily don't see stuff occurring here just because, some of these houses, I know they're are on septic, so in that location would be blocking some of these roads you would build. You wouldn't build a road over a septic system or a drain field, so you get pretty low ground, so they wouldn't have that ability to construct that stuff to the, behind them, or, on the other side of 97 from there. So, this is where some of the questions I've asked, ultimately, if growth is to that point, sometime that traffic's so high, obviously there's gonna be a much greater plan through here than we're talking about today. It's just, that's what the reality is. I don't see just taking some of these houses, because some of these houses in this area are very, very nice and large and have some nice architectural to them, and so a lot more expensive, but I also don't think they create that much traffic and, actually have some favorable sight lines through here. Potentially you could, though, look at some of the existing roads, where we have several roads where we could lose some of those intersections, but then provide better lighting at one of these intersections, because I do often drive through here a lot at night, and it's dark, very dark, even wintertime when, you get the reflection off the snow, but this area is really dark and hard to see, and even with a car at an intersection, I don't often see that either in any rain that's through here, makes it even worse, so. Page 10. I had no comments. And then page 11, we come back to the treatment plant side. I told them that the city's gonna need to always retain 2 access points to that plant just for chemical feed. And then 3 houses that are on the south side, east of the school bus parking, they're south of BP gas station if 11th was extended. They talked about combining a driveway and our one access. I don't think that's physically possible now that the road was just widened through there, and you basically would have a driveway and a road connecting all 3, and it just wouldn't fit. That's obviously something that we've encouraged the school to come to some discussion or terms with, whether they use these houses temporary for VOTEC or trade class, building remodeling, or whatever it is, or a taking for potential bus access. That's a conversation that's on the horizon too, is, they have an application in. We've taken a stance where we haven't seen your ultimate traffic plans. We just got something finally, then emailed to us. Got a lot of questions. We started a conversation today with that. But I'm just concerned that we're not currently meeting their future forecast and traffic and how they really gonna handle that. So
11th Avenue, we've stated that isn't buildable or cost-effective with the wetlands, and they still have issues because I think public safety and roads kind of outweigh wetlands, and I think that, 11th Avenue is also ideal traffic control intersection there. Can we come south on 11th Avenue, say 100 feet, put some type of hammerhead turnaround, something like that, so that then you could tie a frontage road in on the south side of 97, possibly even all the way back to Harrow?
Yeah, I think there's a
development?
potential of that. In that picture, you see that first, I don't know, it looks like a kid's baseball field mound or infield area south of the 110 blue square. Straight south of 11th, right there.
Okay.
I think if you brought the road down that far, then you're certainly not gonna probably went over the environmental permitting aspect of that as you're getting into some of the lowland. Huge drainage way comes up that way too. But if you just wanted to have a conversation with MnDOT, property owners and developers in the area, I certainly think you could probably get something built and permitted. If you came 100 feet off the road, and whether you provided access to the school through those properties, or you can see the highland between the trees, and then so let's say 97 is the black line, then you get that 702 number there in the blue. I think that's developable. And then you got the tree line, which would tell me there's some highland in there, but then south of that tree line, southwest, you obviously get into the wetlands. So you would be closer to 97, but as you started working eastward, I think you have some great flexibility to drop that road then down, which I would say 213th would be a perfect connection to Lynon. Because then you would provide, your access to business, or whatever behind it. And then you got great spacing from 97 for future traffic control. 214th, I know developers would want to connect there, but that's where you get into conversations, you might not have the full access there. You could have a right in, right out if it was a bigger, like, gas station on the corner or something. But as for like full intersection there, that's going to get really close to 97.
Chestnut Creek being just south of here, they have a couple roads that are designated to tie in on the north side too, right?
I think three.
Three of them?
North
Okay.
from the south.
3 to the north,
Three
which
to
would
the
be the
north.
future extension of 210th.
Yep.
Can't quite see it.
Yeah.
It is, if we can go down a little bit, but you can see there.
Yep.
And on their northeast corner of their plat, which would be the southeast corner of this property, we did reserve additional right-of-way to allow 210th to come in right with the golf course driveway in the future.
Okay.
So they line up really nicely. And, you never know what happens with golf courses, So the golf course is in the sewer calculation. So if that did go away and was developed, we do have it built into the capacity to, once the system's all hooked to the way it needs to be, up through Hawthorne Heights. So, but
Well, I'd like to see, what you just discussed. I'd like to see 11th coming down and tying into 213th. Or, whatever the developer's plans are for that area, but, having those two roads and, connectability, and whether there's a frontage road along there or other access points. That's something that's gonna happen soon. I mean, with Chestnut Creek there now, this would be the next parcel, I think, that would get a go-ahead.
Does that create a whole nother, so I like the connectivity. That does potentially create a different traffic pattern though for Chestnut Creek and a different amount of volume hitting 11th. Because you could imagine that becomes the shortcut, especially if this is already a problematic intersection and we might need to rethink strength of control at 11th.
Correct, yeah. Roundabout, stoplight, whatever,
Yep.
whatever it's
Something.
gonna need.
This is today is even to come out here and turn right is incredibly difficult. So to try to come up here and turn left would also would be certain times of day, that's a tough.
so that's kind of where we're at with the access management study. I know it's pretty overwhelming in areas, but what I would just suggest starting, with the areas that you're very familiar with, reviewing what MnDOT's written, and, any feedback that you guys can provide would be helpful. So,
Just email you feedback
Yep.
then, Ryan?
email me and copy Dan, so the city has a copy of it too. But I would like to respond to them by April.
Well, and I guess, I don't know if there's a really good way to get out, but, anybody that lives in this area, I'd like to hear their feedback as well to be able to
Worth
include
doing a
that. with-
follow-up. We had great participation at that and a lot of interest in closing some of those access points. Is it worth doing another open house?
I don't think we have time, but, just to get the word out
Okay.
and get emails back would be beneficial.
At some point, we'll want to engage with property owners too, because some of these, aren't going to be easy decisions, and they'll affect directly property owners. Every time you do close something, traffic goes somewhere else, right? So,
Is that gonna be our job to engage with that, or is that more MnDOT's job to?
well,
Reach
MnDOT
out.
won't engage something to that level until there's a project.
Okay.
So, if we want to be forefront on that, then certainly that would be our opportunities. I think holding an open house at some point would be good, but I would try to mirror it up with something else too, because you might not get a good turnout, you might do, but instead of having just another meeting for one thing, maybe it's teamed with something else, but.
Well, I mean, even if there's just a mailing list we can develop for property owners on 97 so that we can communicate with them, or email
So
lists.
the GIS system can go through and highlight all those properties, and you can create a specific mailing list just for that.
We also have we have a list of who attended that open house. Wasn't there a sign-in?
I believe so, yeah.
Maybe there was.
But another great thing about this is now you have the data. You have the data of all those access points. You have the data where they're located. So with that, that's stuff again that you can use in grant opportunities or planning with applications, or especially just building permit stuff. If there's potential on doing something, you can have those conversations now, and it's not required. It's a recommendation. It's what's put together with safety in mind, but no unfunded mandate here. So
The traffic counts were done before that, was it Autumnwood Hills, or what's the apartment right there?
yeah, all the traffic counts were done obviously
Before that opened up?
Yep.
Okay. And they were done in the summertime too, without school in session?
Oh, at Harrow?
On 97.
Well, that I don't know. Because
But-
MnDOT does traffic counts more frequently than we do. We're required to do traffic counts on our state aid roads every 4 years, and this year is that year. So we've already have a company that will come out and do it. They're gonna do all the school zones right away, so we can make sure we get those counts in the school areas and the other rural areas, then they'll finish up later, but, so 18 is our year, so we will get new traffic counts on Harrow, Goodview, 8th, 11th, all the state aid routes. And those go into a computer system at MnDOT, so you can actually access those anywhere as long as you have internet access. You can look at other cities too.
Now, they look at the traffic count and factor that with other roads, but do they look at, hourly type of traffic count, or is it just the daily traffic count?
Well, they're just gonna express to you the annual daily traffic that's
Okay.
calculated out.
'Cause I think these roads, obviously they back up significantly in the morning.
Peak times.
There's a couple peak times that.
So like at Goodview
most
and
of the
8th,
load.
we have very good traffic information there. So we know AM, PM peaks. So we have all that. We actually have some of that now at Harrow ourselves. To get that AM peak time, you're gonna just set up a camera 24 hours at these locations to get some of that stuff. But
Okay.
yeah, otherwise they just set up, like we'll set out tube counters, and that's how our traffic counts are done.
No, that's fine. Go ahead, Ed.
Ryan, those potential road connections or extensions that you talked about, if a developer's doing that land, do we have those laid out for him in advance, or is it?
That's what
or is
they
it
bring
his
in their
discretion?
applications, that's the things we talk about, where do I get sewer, where do I get water, where do I gotta connect to? Roads, sidewalks, then the discussion, parks or money, so we go through all that stuff, part of pre-application meetings, before they even really start getting going, or they might just have it start with a hand sketch, or they might have did a color rendering, hey, what do you guys think? I think we'll even have a concept for a smaller subdivision, next your council meeting. And, that obviously is really straightforward, but, so those, like Chestnut Creek, we went through those conversations of that stuff. Headwaters 11th, they know, what they gotta connect to and build and all that, part of the, I guess, original plating, but, so a developer really knows what we are requiring or requesting of them up front, before they get into plans, or even come before with you guys. Now, sometimes I lose what I've tried to require, but it's a game, right?
Right.
You guys don't always agree with me.
All right. Well, Ryan, we'll try and email you our thoughts on this and
That'd be great.
build it up from there. All right, thank you. And Dan, excess funds.
Mayor, members of council, just give me 1 second while I get that memo pulled up here. Basically, what's being presented tonight is just looking for some direction on what we want to do with the excess funds from 2017. One thing with this, as I kind of present this tonight, is keep in mind that a lot of this at this point is still, the numbers are still, there could be a small changes to these numbers. These are basically fairly good estimates that Gail provided me on this, but we're not fully out of 17. It hasn't been fully closed out yet, so there might be some potential shifting to these numbers. But basically, we are looking at approximately about $1 million in positive excess funds from 2017. A lot of that has to do with, we had approximately $575,000 in excess revenues come in. A lot of that was building permit revenue tied to school projects. So it was one-time funds for all the school projects that came forward. You see here that general government, there actually was an overage in that budget of approximately $30,000. She didn't specify where that overage came from, but just kind of just generalized that there was, general government did come in over budget. Public safety came in under budget by approximately $183,000. Again, that was mainly due to the vacant officer positions that were carried throughout the year. Public Works also came in under budget, $284,000, again due to seal coat, asphalt, salt, fuel, and less engineering costs than what were budgeted. And then Public Works, Parks and Recreation came in $43,000 under budget. So again, we have a total of about $1 million. Again, like I said before, that number could shift slightly when we actually close everything out in 17. But that kind of gives us a number of what we're kind of looking at, what we have that we can reallocate to different projects or different funds. And we do need to make this kind of a motion to kind of have some direction where to put these funds before we go through our audit, because the auditors like to see this money in a fund before they go through the audit process. So I asked Gail to kind of go through the numbers and see, where are some options that we have for this transfer. One was we have a 2010A debt fund for TIF number 21, where the final debt payment was made in 2016, and the fund currently has a cash deficit of $157,000. She said we could take a transfer there to make that to zero. Yep.
Can we talk about these as we go through, or do you want us to hold questions?
No, you can go through them as you go through.
This is a finished product. There's no additional opportunity for recovery in this particular fund. Is that right?
As far as I know, yeah, it's a closeout project, and that's just the deficit that's there.
Ben, do you remember, it feels like we talked to Aaron about this when we had opening budget workshops, and I thought we had talked about closing this one out, as in funding it, making it's,
Right,
until we transfer the money, it's gonna hang out there, there's nothing that's gonna take care of it.
It's a shift of funds, it's not a, and that was for the airport?
Or is that Broadway
I
TIF?
think it was Broadway TIF. I mean, I have to go back. It was TIF 21, but I think it was Broadway.
Can you confirm the project?
Yeah, I can confirm that project.
The next one is still an open project and still has some potential to recover, right?
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify. Do you know the amount, the second one, the Headwaters, what the deficit is?
No, she didn't pull that deficit number for me. She just kind of said there was an option. I know in the past there was an appetite to pay that off because the potential, as lots sell in there, to pay that balance back was there. And it was just kind of like, that was recommended by the auditor to get that fund balance, to put some movement in that fund balance, if I recall. But I think last year when this was brought up, there wasn't any appetite at that point to make a transfer into this fund because, again, that fund balance could get paid back as lots develop or sell out in Headwaters. What we did in 2016 is we basically transferred all of the excess revenues, the one-time funds, into capital equipment fund to kind of help jumpstart that fund. And that, again, is an option for this year. It's basically would help us kind of jumpstart the pay-as-you-go equipment purchases, kind of help deal with the backlog of equipment needs and kind of get us set up for, funding those future equipment needs. Another option that had been discussed was establishing a separate fund for gravel road paving, so kind of getting some fund balance set up for that. So if a project does come forward for paving a gravel road, there would be some funds available for that. Also, just kind of looked at for some one-time capital purchases that the city has either not done or basically would be, kind of, what can we do with this excess, one-time fund revenues. We looked at the senior center. There'd been some discussion of, getting the senior center back up to take care of all of their some of their deferred maintenance. So we looked at what it would cost to do a dishwasher replacement, replace the front door and the side door, and add a key card system to that place. Talked to a locksmith, and there is an option for a wireless key card system that would be self-contained at the senior center. And again, all these cost estimates below are estimates. We don't exactly have, there's a little bit of flexibility in these numbers. That's approximately $25,000 to get the senior centers, to get those items taken care of at the senior center. There's also a need in the police squad cars. All of the laptops that are currently in there, they were all purchased on I believe it was a federal grant, Rick?
Yeah.
A federal grant funds about 5 years ago. So we have, all of those computers are aging at the same rate. So what happens is that every 5-6 years, we kind of have this kind of wave of replacements that need to take place in there. Part of the thought process was at this time is just to do a one-time, project to get all of those computers back up to, replace all the ones that need to get replaced. And then as squads age out, we would replace the computers, kind of get them on that replacement strategy where if a squad gets replaced, the computer will get replaced at the time the squad. So we wouldn't kind of keep having this cycle of we make a one-time investment and then every 5 years we're kind of faced with another need for another $50,000 to replace them all. The other option for that would be to just keep that in every 5 years as a pay-as-you-go capital fund to kind of keep those moving forward. But there is a need. Those computers are at the end of their life. They're at about the 5-6 year mark. So we're basically, in our current computer replacement policy, we're right on the edge of those needing to get replaced. So that's one option, is to kind of get all of those replaced. There's also a need for a couple of our inspection vehicles in building inspections and just code enforcement. We're kind of at the point where we had a lot of hand-me-down vehicles in there, and those vehicles are starting to get to the point where they're going to start requiring more and more maintenance. A couple of them actually, if you get in one of our inspection trucks, you can actually see through the floor of it, and you can see the ground, the floor is just kind of rusted out. But a couple of things was that potentially we could use those to start replacing those cars or those vehicles before they completely just kind of, fall apart. Basically, just kind of looking for some feedback of where we want to see these excess funds be transferred. And I take that back to Gail, work with Gail to kind of develop the right, get all those things structured so we can balance this out. But just again, at this point, let's looking for some direction as to where we want to go with these excess one-time funds. I think a key thing on this too is that this is, one-time monies is probably not always, this is not going to happen every single year. We had some anomalies last year that led to this. And again, it's probably not going to be repeatable moving forward. So, we're looking strictly at one-time funds at this point. Just kind of want to make sure everybody's, bears that in mind as they make decisions.
All right. Well, thank you, Dan. I'm going to weigh in on quite a few here, and then we can maybe go through and have discussions. But, the first one is just a paperwork more than actual spending the money. It's moving from one to the other. So, it's the money's coming out of one, going to another. It's not affecting that bottom line. I think that needs to be taken care of, but I want to make sure that that original 2010 debt, there wasn't some type of other commitments, anything else to that we haven't. I don't want to just forget about it if it's supposed to come from somewhere else.
Yep.
Rolling on to the Headwaters Industrial Park Fund, some modest payment into that, I think looks good for our bond rating. I don't want to see that paid off, but I think we need to make some type of minimal $5,000-$10,000, some type of something every year into that so that we are moving it down and making some progress to it. As far as when I look back, some's coming from police department, some's coming from public works, some park and rec. I don't want to penalize any of our departments for not spending the money that they have. So, that needs to be kept in perspective. That doesn't mean they have to spend that money in that year or the next year, but we need to have some type of recognition that, they're doing a great job because they aren't spending that money, but if they need something, it's going to be there for them. whether it's computers in the cars or whatever, yeah. I'd really love you, Chief, to get another grant for those instead of it coming right out of here. But yeah, we need to make sure all the departments that have saved that money get recognized for that. And I'm not sure how we do that policy. I don't want to just spend it in those departments if we don't need to. But I want to make sure that, you know, that's recognized and that rolls forward in a budget or, you know, however that does. So I'd look for ideas on how we can do that anyway. It's imperative that we establish some type of fund to help get our roads paved. I don't want to pay for them completely, but if it's, you know, 1/3 for the city and 1/3 for each property owner, or if it's half and half, or if it's, you know, where there's a lot of wetlands, things like that, that we do something. But I think we need to establish a fund and put a significant amount of money, $100,000, 200, whatever we decide. And then every year as we move forward, we should be adding some money to that till we get to a cap level, maybe 500,000 or something. But we need to have that there to help property owners do it because they're much larger chunks of land than in the city. It's a lot more expensive for those property owners to get it done. But in the long run, maintenance, durability, everything else, I think that helps. So, yeah, I'd like to see something happen there. As far as equipment goes to, you know, whether it's a senior center or the police squads or, you know, things like that, you know, that should be in our normal budget. I know the senior center needs a dishwasher. I know they could use a new front door, a key card. It doesn't have to happen all at once. It should be in the capital improvement fund. I don't think we have anything there that's, the dishwasher I think is an urgent issue, but that's not $25,000. So, you know, that needs to be addressed, but the others I think we should come up with in their budgets and in coming years.
Isn't the senior center receiving some revenue from LATV?
Yeah, they are.
Some rental.
So
Yep, they're getting some rental. I don't know where, I'm the liaison over there. I don't remember exactly. You know, they are actually showing a profit right now. For several years, they were losing money. So I don't think financially they're
solid.
they're doing okay right now. They can pay their bills, they can pay the employees, but you know they're not really doing much beyond that anyway.
Well, this is kind of the opportunity for us to do those one time, so even if they were on the future capital improvement plan, we're just bumping those up, right? So we're taking them off, recognizing that there's some excess funds available, so.
And if I can just clarify on the senior center too, we try to, with our current building maintenance budget, we go through, like last year, we go through about August, September, and take a look at where we are from our building maintenance perspective. And if there's any budget left over, we try to go there and see if there's a project we can take care of. Like, is it some lights that we can fix, whatever we can do within budget. But looking at kind of what they would need to, you know, the doors are a bigger project. They are needed over there. There's a couple of times this last winter where there was some issues with frost shifting and stuff, and we had some difficulties closing doors. They also leak a lot of air into the building themselves. So it was kind of identified as a bigger need, and we're trying to look at, you know, we're too early in the year at this point to really make a good projection as to where we're going to be from the building maintenance side, you know, but if there was, you know, if it was like October, we're looking at, and we still had some excess funds, we would potentially be able to do it. But kind of given that we had some one-time revenues, that's kind of where like, oh, we have some one-time fund balance. That if we can take care of this, and we don't need to worry about it. But we do try to accommodate some of those purchases and try to have them cost participate as they're able to with their current budget as well.
The inspector vehicles, I didn't know our vehicles were getting that shabby.
Yeah.
But they're not in the capital improvement plan for the next year?
I don't believe those were included in there. I mean, typically I think what we have over there are usually the hand-me-down vehicles. So if Public Works upgrades a truck, they'll get, you know, sometimes we'll take one of those back. I know one of the maintenance vehicles is an old Squad that was going to go to there. We ended up using that one. They're just kind of getting to their end of their useful
What's
life.
the white, van or whatever that's,
That's the building inspector goes out in. So that's a newer one. That's the Chevy, I can't remember what it is. It's Traverse or some SUV type thing. But that's what the building inspector uses. Our code inspector is using a 5-speed Ford Ranger. That one's in okay shape. There's an S10 that's the one you can see through that used to be the old building inspector vehicle. That one's still in our fleet. And then we have the old Sergeant's Tahoe, I believe it was, that we use for maintenance, uses for running errands and getting stuff around the city, like from here up to the park or vice versa, for going to Menards or picking up materials for the building here. They use that one. And it runs, but there's a few transmission issues with it. Every now and again, you go through the roundabout and it'll catch at a higher RPM and you just go through a little quicker than you want to. But that was one of the options as well, is just to kind of get through those where we can kind of get them up on a plan where there are a couple newer vehicles in there where that'll take care of that need for a number of years moving forward.
okay.
Are we getting any vehicles from other vehicle replacement, like the Chiefs?
Yeah, that was put in the 2018 budget or approved was,
Isn't Al getting a
new-
new vehicle?
what's that?
Isn't Al getting a new?
I
or-
believe so. I don't want to speak for him, but I think so.
So his old one is a trade-in, or is it?
Yeah, what we do is with any of our vehicles, unless we allocate it to another department, like the Tahoe, I don't remember what year that one was, we sell those at auction, and then we take that money and, that helps out with the budget as well. That's why we try to sell those vehicles at a certain mileage, so that way you are getting your bang for your buck when you are selling at auction.
And I think on that point, I mean, one of the conversations was for the building department here, building the maintenance division here, is they were looking at the Tahoe work, but they're looking more like a panel van with an open space where they could put bigger loads in the back of that, where they're not having to kind of navigate across the seat, where it's more of a work utility van type thing, where it just has a little bit more utility for them. But again, that's kind of where those vehicles are coming from. But you're right, there are some other vehicles that are due to be replaced that we could kick back down if we wanted to, as an option.
What about the police officer recruitment? Whatever happened with that?
Recruitment?
Great, we're still a short one, right?
Yes, yep.
Can any of that money be used toward that situation? I mean, we're talking about, I can't.
It's budgeted.
Roll it down, it's budget, we haven't talked about it, so that's the
But
problem.
I think the vacancy is budgeted, right?
It's budgeted at this point. We're holding on it to wait till we hear back from the SRO agreement.
What I'm
on the
saying
police
is we
side.
would need additional funds. We already have it budgeted.
No, and you wouldn't probably want to use these funds to fund a position because, again, they're not guaranteed annual funds. This is more one of those things you want to do on a one-off type basis. Can you take
But
care of it?
that goes for public works too, because this year they had a more severe winter. And so it's gonna be a different number coming this next budget.
Correct.
2018.
Yeah, this number for 18, this 284, probably won't be there just because of the severity of the winter, the salt usage. A couple projects come online, that number could definitely go down. So this is why you wouldn't want to use these to maintain like a salary for a position.
I think Councilmember Husnick's talking more about just the incremental cost to recruit and more of the dollars around starting that recruiting process, and not necessarily to fund the position, but to provide resources for the recruitment.
I wasn't implying that we'd use that to fund that, but,
So I did have a similar observation around just recruitment in general. There's a lot of positions that are open, and maybe some of these funds we could evaluate. Let's just make sure we've got operations settled down and the right people in the right seats, and some resources to urge that along. This might be well timed. Not for the positions themselves, but just for the recruitment and getting up to speed and training and all of that. There is some onboarding costs, and funding that with part of this might make sense.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I think we're also looking at, those positions that are open right now. Those salaries aren't going out of our current budget, so we have that,
Yep.
those funds available
We
to,
do.
for training and that. So yeah, I think
I mean,
we've addressed a lot of that. I mean, there's other options. There's other things, I don't know. And big one to me was upgrading our water meters, getting radios put in. We're losing a lot of
What was that cost? What was the cost on doing that? It was a while ago we talked about.
Well, the antennas were not that big a cost, but then changing out all the water meters or the water meters that haven't been changed out so far.
How many do you know offhand?
There's quite a few, but I don't recall what those numbers were, but I know they were fairly significant costs. But to that point, I mean, I would have to verify with Getty we'd be able to transfer towards those because those are enterprise funds and those are user supported. And I don't know if we'd be able to jumpstart that replacement.
Can you supplement that? I thought we could supplement that. We couldn't pull back the other.
That's
way.
possible, and that's what I had to confirm. I just want to make confirmation that you guys get good direction on that one, if it's a possibility or not.
And maybe there's a similar to the thought on the gravel road. Maybe it's the start to a fund and you plant some seed money.
Right.
Yeah.
Just a little bit about the gravel roads, just so you guys know all the information that, our state aid account increase this year will be projected to increase the next 3 years, with that increase the first year because legislation put more money into the state aid allocation. So with that, we get construction funds and maintenance funds, right? So the maintenance funds is what's been going towards your seal coats and stuff like that. But there was that overage, the additional money. So maybe that additional money that you started encumbering could just go into that pot. But then you now have 4 years of revenue that's not tied to the tax levy. We did do assessments on 15th Street. I don't know where that money's going. So that could be potentially reinvested in your roads and allocated towards gravel road fund. And the franchise fees. So I've been given $700,000 a year. Other than this year's project, we got $25,000 from storm, water, sewer because all utility work and significantly under budgeted, so you're eating in the franchise fees again, but our franchise revenue has increased since the start of 700,000. But I've still been at 700, but every project's been underneath budget. So wherever that capital is going, that could be rolled over into your gravel road funds or additional revenue you're actually collecting off franchise fees. We know it's more than 700,000. I don't know what that number is.
We need to find out.
So there's
what that
3
number is.
revenue options for you
For
to
roads.
not tap into this.
Okay.
Aaron and I had those conversations at the end, and obviously they kind of died, right? So that would be something to explore. That's a continuous source of revenue.
Well, I don't want to sacrifice what we're doing currently. I think we're maintaining.
We got a good plan. It's just we
How often
ran
do
into
we-
a lot of utility work this year, like a lot. It's
How often
bad.
do we revisit that pavement management plan to
Every
see
year.
if it, okay, so we
So every year
actually-
we'll drive the roads and re-rate the roads, and then we work with Public Works through the budget process. Some stuff, it had to jump out to Third Lake. We had to get back out there because you can't even drive down the road right now. We wanted to wait till 19 to get it back out there, but we had to stop some stuff and jump out there, so.
Well, North Shore is gonna be a killer, but that isn't gonna be that much longer before it has to be addressed too. And
Luckily, that's a state aid road, so you would have the ability of franchise fees or state aid construction funds, or if maintenance if you wanted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But like the stuff out at Hayward out there by north of, or east of First Lake there, that's a local road. Your only source of funding right now designated towards that is franchise fees.
okay. Well, I think we need to kind of get a grip on, how much franchise revenue we're getting and how much we're spending on the roads. And I think we can develop a funding mechanism to convert roads to there. And then, we're just gonna have to develop a policy of how we do that and how we designate roads. I mean, there are gonna be quite a few roads that are never gonna get blacktop. It doesn't justify it, but there's some that are definitely in need of it that, the
Revisiting
property
assessment
owners on there
policy.
can't afford to do it, so.
Revisiting the assessment policy too. We've talked about it, but I don't think we've changed it.
Yep. So, back to the $1 million question.
2 million, almost.
Yeah. We've got multiple outlets. I think we need to look at that industrial park fund, the other fund where, how much we're gonna put in towards that, and then kind of work down from there.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ed.
I'd like to pick off some of these small ones that are on here, just get rid of them.
Yeah.
And then obviously look at what's got to go into roads, but I also would like to keep something in a rainy day fund or whatever you want to call it, because we have things like the lawsuit on the airport. We don't know how that's going to shake out.
Yeah.
We got some
Well, I
things-
think we're
we got
also
some
running-
things out there.
We're also running over 56% on our general fund.
Yeah, we are currently.
So that would be helpful to see is where are we on the general fund surplus? And how much cushion do we have on top of the cushion?
I mean, things like the police computers, I'd be in favor of that.
Right.
I just as soon not.
Done, yeah.
You know, I think it would be good to do them, but I would like to get into a.
But I'd like to
more
get
of a
off of the. where they all
Yearly,
come-
you know, a couple a year or something
That's what I'm
like that.
saying, if we did something like
Because
that.
we're-
Make it sustainable?
Somebody else is gonna have a problem 5 years from now, how to.
No, but instead of
do that.
replacing them all,
Right.
getting to,
into-
you know, I don't know how many you got there, chief, but
Yeah, there's currently 11. And, back when we got
so if
those.
you do 4 a year or something like that.
Sure, yeah, when we're building new squads or what have you, and Dan and I did talk about that. And just to go back, when we got those laptops, it was the same time that we got in-car cameras, same time we got new portable radios, and all that was unfortunately because of 9/11, and there was just an influx of money that was going to the feds, the states, the counties, the cities, and that's where a lot of those grants were. And that grant money, unfortunately, has just really dried up. And I've heard that over the last few years, too, is that we always try and you're kind of hoping that there might be some grant money out there, and it's just not coming. And unfortunately, it was one of those deals where we were able to get all those laptops at the same time, but it's kind of a catch-22 because now we're in this situation where we need to start replacing them.
I think Al was in the same situation on his self-breathing
Yep,
apparatuses.
exactly.
He purchased them all at once,
Yes.
and unfortunately, they all have to be by law replaced at a certain
Sure.
vintage or age.
Yeah.
And then he figured out some way to stagger it, so they don't all come up the next time again.
Well, just to remind everybody too that we don't have to spend the money. We could actually use it to fund a tax reduction, give some of that back to our taxpayers as well. I just think that there's definite needs to bring us up to a current level. We may even be able to fund a couple more lift stations. I don't know how this works versus that, or, we could pay down part of the bond that's here. I think we're getting close to the point where we can start paying some of that off too. So we could look at quite a few different things, but get a consensus on what we feel is most beneficial for the city.
I think just one thing to keep in mind of that, kind of looking long-term, there are some bigger capital purchases on the CIP. I think one of the fire trucks is in there, which is approximately $500,000-ish. There are some pretty big purchases that are on the horizon that if you were to kind of, again, give a jump start to the capital improvement, the pay-as-you-go, when those purchases come forward, there's no need to scramble to find the funding mechanism. It's already there. It's just to move funds in. You're saved up for it. We just basically are able to pay cash for it at that point. So that is definitely an option, especially considering there are some large purchases that are on the horizon.
That makes sense.
So to meet our financial obligations here, do we have to actually create a different fund, or you just, with the money that's left after you decide what you're going to spend it on, does that go in a separate fund?
Like the remainder? You want to try to allocate this all to a specific, you just don't want to have a balance sitting in there. You want to show that it went to a specific, like, if it goes to the capital improvement fund, that whatever money goes in there is designated for a purchase that's debited to that capital improvement fund budget item. If you go and move it to TIF 21, or to pay off TIF 2010A, you just pay off that balance that's there. So on some level, it's an accounting, you got to move the money around, because right now it's just sitting in, it's like kind of equated. You have a bunch of money in your checking account, and you got to move it to your savings account and your investment account. And that's kind of what we're doing here, to just basically get to a balanced revenue and expenditures line item in the accounting. Just to kind of summarize what I've kind of heard is that basically, if we were to pay off TIF 21, put $10,000 towards this fund 251, put $200,000 in a gravel road fund to start there, and then take care of that, those 3 items that are listed, the senior center, the police squads, and 2 replacement vehicles. What's left over is roughly $492 that could go to the pay-as-you-go capital fund as a starting point. I mean, that would allow you to kind of basically kind of piecemeal off of this list, but still put a large chunk towards that capital improvement fund or pay-as-you-go. So in future years, when we do those fire truck purchases, we're able to basically recapitalize for it.
Isn't pay-as-you-go already fully funded, though? I thought we had that fully funded out 5 years. And so this would just be in advance of that, meaning lower levy in the future, which is not a
Yeah,
bad
I
thing.
mean, yeah, and that could help. I mean, it also could help, if there's I'd have to go back and confirm with Gail, but that was, again, one of the recommendations she made was just to basically kind of keep that going in there. So if a purchase needed to come forward, we could have fund balance.
That's
available.
basically a rainy day fund, is what it
Yeah.
is.
So a couple things,
Yeah.
I have hesitations on is, number one, that Fund 251, I'd like to find out what the balances are there
Yes.
before we do anything.
Yes.
50,000 to replace 2 inspection vehicles here. If it's not our building inspector's vehicle, I want to know how many vehicles we need. Vehicles are an expense. They cost money every year. They get older every year. They wear out whether you put miles on them or not. Maybe we consolidate that into one vehicle. I just can't imagine needing a specific panel van just to haul stuff in and out of this building. To me, that just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So I'd like to get a better explanation of what we have for vehicles and what those needs are, because we shouldn't need that many specialized vehicles. And before we spend that money, I'd like to get that explanation there. I would like a conversation coming up potentially on the water meters and the radios to see where we're at with that. I think it would be beneficial for us, beneficial for our residents, and it would also be part of the key to bringing in-house utility billing, an automated utility billing. Also easier for residents if it's a automated billing and pay type system than we have now. So whether that comes out of the water fund or, some of it may have to come out of here. But I think that's going to be part of the future for our accounting system, our financial system here as well. All right, any other?
A nit comment and then a question. Just for my own knowledge, can you get some detail on how general government was over budget? Just like to know what missed on that, and you don't need to tell us now, but.
Yeah, I'll look into that, Elbridge.
Okay. And I'm not expecting.
I
that
would say
detail.
top of the mind would probably be legal expenses and some other one-off
Be
expenses.
good to know that.
I think that's what I'm guessing about. I can look into that for you.
Okay. And then, so a little off topic but related, property tax prepayments that happened at the end of 2017, those go into the county. I know Washington County had a massive amount of cash influx. Do we see that as advanced cash, or what happens there? Do they get that time value of money, and do they get to hold until, what does that look like?
I think they get the whole, I'd have to confirm, but I don't believe we got advanced on that. I mean, I can.
Yeah, I don't think we
I think
get a
I think the
payment.
county kept it,
Recognize
and
it's
then
just an advance, but it is
Yeah.
there's some value there.
I think they still pay us
I
at the.
think we'd be entitled to it because a portion of it is prepaid
It is
to us.
for us, or, ultimately we'll end up in our coffers. I just don't know what the arrangement there and who has the benefit of that
And how
time
would it turn
value of
out? Because if
money.
you prepaid and our taxes go up,
Right.
who comes up short? They prepaid at,
Well, it's prepaid on
Today's
the.
rate.
but it's-
Estimated rate.
It's
So-
prepaid on the
Estimated.
assessment, yeah,
Okay.
right. But there's a lot of municipalities that had a lot of inflow, and I just don't know what the rules are for if.
I don't think they know
It's-
yet. There was some scuttlebutt as to whether or not it's even legal.
Well, IRS deductibility's certainly been a question, but there is cash sitting somewhere that if it's, we can't be the only city that's asking that question, so just wasn't sure what the answer was.
Yeah, I could look into it. I don't have an answer off the top of my head.
And it's just a cash advance, it's not like we've got excess funding, it's just,
No.
but cash today is better than cash tomorrow.
I think one other point we should look at, Clear Lake was here looking for a donation to help with weed control on the lake. I think between Clear Lake and Forest Lake, we need to look at our yearly contribution to both lakes. It's a huge asset, brings us a lot of tax revenue having those houses around the lakes. And we need to step up our contributions to maintaining both of
Did they
those.
come with a dollar ask?
Clear Lake
Yeah,
did.
they
but I
did.
didn't hear anything about Forest Lake.
Forest Lake, is it probably just continued participation in the weed harvesting program? Is that what they're looking for? I'm sure they would
No, I
prefer
think
more if we had an
we
appetite
do
for more.
we do a contribution
We do a
to
contribution to it, but they didn't ask for an
an
addition.
additional one at all.
Whereas Clear Lake wanted an additional amount above their contribution.
Yeah, it was a one-time
Right.
contribution, but, I think we need to have a conversation with both to make sure we're doing as much as we can to keep the lakes healthy.
Well, also in light of that, they know that it's a one-time because we are in this budget surplus position, not that it's an expectation that we're committing ourselves every year. Next year's budget
That's
was
all
in
they
a
were
different
asking for, is a
situation.
one-time deal.
Right.
And then there is actually, I did look into that, there is current budget that we could account for that
And I
increase
think,
in
I
there.
think the watershed district has to be part of that conversation too.
That's-
I really do, because. Well, yeah, I know the Clear Lake, Forest Lake watershed district is always talking about all the different lakes that they treat. They need to be part of that conversation.
Good point.
All right. Any more discussion on this topic?
I think I got enough to go on. I'll go back and work with Gail and get that dialed in.
Does that come back for us next meeting for a final?
Yeah, it'll need to be it'll need to be finalized before the audit, which is the second week of April. So there'll be something at the next meeting. If we can't get agreement at the next meeting, I'll have it on the first meeting in April for sure. But that's kind of the absolute last time we have to get something there so we can get that taken care of before the auditors are on site.
Be helpful just to see a full fund balance of all funds, like see whole population, where are we sitting? We've got the deficit position in the airport construction fund, and just to have that whole picture so we can see all options, not just the options that are here.
I'll have Gail produce that.
Might as well, if we can get that ahead of the meeting, because
Yep.
it's gonna be a 250-page report. It's not gonna be easy to flip out here. But capital improvement, our capital improvement policy as well, or what, we should maybe revisit that, as long as we get some excess funds too, to see where we're at. All right. Anything else to bring up?
I do just
before
have
the
one
council?
quick other, just with last week, I assume you guys saw the email that was sent out that Chad, the building official, Chad Payment, turned his resignation and he got an opportunity to go work for the city of Blaine. He got a great opportunity, so he'll be leaving the city of Forest Lake. I believe April 6th is his last day with the city. We did meet this morning. I met him or Al and I met with Chad and Nate to kind of figure out how we're gonna, kind of now. The field has changed slightly from the last time I presented last Monday, and we kind of looked at how we're going to approach this new reality, and came up with a good plan to kind of march forward. And we're a little bit heavily on min-spec for all inspections, commercial and residential at this point. They're also able to do some plan reviews so that kind of get us through the interim period. I have Chad working on kind of a summary where he's at, so there shouldn't be any disruption in services that we're offering at this point. We kind of have that, try to set up as seamless as possible. Just with kind of the immediacy of needing to get this position filled and kind of the competitiveness right now of the building official job market, there's quite a few other cities that are kind of in the market right now. I was just doing a quick search this morning and I probably saw 3 other municipalities that are in the market. So I'm assuming it's going to be kind of a tighter recruitment pool than we've had in the past. I'm just kind of looking for just kind of a temperature, if there's a agreement that we can move forward with the recruitment kind of prior to going through the formal process of bringing it up at the next council meeting. I'd like to get this job posted as quickly as possible, just kind of seeing the need is there. This is kind of a key position in the building division. So, I mean, if I can get agreement, I would just go ahead and start posting it. Obviously, the hire would be dependent upon council approval, so there's still that moment at that point. Just as kind of just a little bit of just trying to expedite the recruitment process. We're already in the market for the building inspector as well, or the fire technician as well. So it's kind of good to kind of get everything back in the market at one time when they see that we're, doing the recruitment. So just kind of seeing if there's any, what the indication is.
Exactly how it should be done. One of the things that, by law, we have to have a building official in the city for us, period. So I don't know why would take council approval just for the recruitment process. I can see where the approval for the hiring process, but not the recruitment necessarily.
Yeah, there was that. It was kind of a policy shift last year, or with there was the ask of, as we brought recruitments forward, that there's an ask that they be brought to council for approval prior to it. And typically I would, but given that if I wait till next week, I'm losing a full week on getting everything in the market. I'd rather keep that week to kind of at least potentially sequence out with the rest of them. So we're looking at potentially, if everything goes well, mid-May for a start on everything. But to your point on the building official, we were able to transfer some of those things internally, so we do have that part of it figured out, but the position of itself in terms of what the
Yeah,
work.
in a couple months, you're gonna need that.
Absolutely, and that's where, if we can kind of get them in, or get this new position in, kind of in the middle of it, it kind of leaves the short-term, long-term plan still kind of in place with just one little more kind of dynamic that's there. And we are meeting with MinSpec later this week to make sure they're going to be able to accommodate the extra need, and indications and conversations we've had with them after Chad announced his resignation sound like they are going to be able to meet the increase in demand, no problem. So we're having a logistical meeting this week, so I should have a pretty good idea by Monday of exactly where we're going to land. But if it's okay, I probably will just put the recruitment out on Monday, or excuse me, tomorrow, and just kind of start that process moving forward. And hopefully we bring a bunch of candidates forward at future meetings for higher authorizations, and get everybody on board in the next few months.
Sounds good. All right, any other business? Look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Yeah, I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.